Chapter 2299. Soaring Cultivation. Ling Han turned to Hu Niu and the others, and said, "The flow of time here is extremely strange. It seems as if one's divine sense can function countless times faster than normal. We can take advantage of this to cultivate." He had used his divine sense to deliver this message. Otherwise, if he had opened his mouth to speak, it would have taken heaven knew how long to deliver this message. Perhaps it would have taken 1 year, or perhaps it would have taken 10 years. A time flow altered by an 18th Lotus elite was definitely formidable. The Empress and the others didn't even try to nod. They were all smart people, so they immediately understood Ling Han's advice. To others, this kind of accelerated time flow was of no use. After all, only the time flow for their divine sense was accelerated, while the time flow for their physical body was slowed down. This was much like cultivating under the reincarnation tree. However, it was a different story for Ling Han and company. This was because in reality, they had already reached the immortal palace tier. As such, their physical bodies had already satisfied the cultivation conditions. Right now, they were simply recultivating using the regulations of the foreign realm. It could be said that they simply needed to cultivate their divine senses. Thus, sitting on the tree for a day could perhaps allow their divine senses to undergo dozens of years of cultivation. Their cultivation could soar in leaps and bounds. The 4 of them immediately shut their eyes, entering a state of cultivation. Not long ago, they had been in frequent contact with the Origin Magic Cube, which allowed them to gain a great deal of comprehensions. However, they hadn't yet sorted through these comprehensions in a systematic manner, mainly because they hadn't had enough time. Now, however, a door had been opened for them. They had more than enough time to digest these comprehensions. In any case, if they didn't cultivate now, what else could they do? The difference in flow of time between their divine senses and their bodies existed, so they couldn't control their bodies at all. Ling Han didn't give this advice to Celestial Maiden Yunhe and the others. They didn't belong to the same side, so he was already showing great mercy by not killing them. However, these people were either Emperor tiers or Monarch tiers, so it wasn't long before they made sense of the situation as well. Their panic subsided, and they also started to cultivate. The large tree continued to flow down the river. Several days passed, and the currents finally became gentle again. Everyone's body shuddered, and they immediately discovered that they had become countless times faster than before. The flow of time acting on their physical bodies had returned to normal. Crack! Dark clouds gathered overhead, bringing with it heavenly tribulation. Moreover, there wasn't only a single heavenly tribulation. Instead there were 4. They targeted Ling Han, the Empress, Hu Niu, and bewitching Maiden Ro. Their divine senses had cultivated for heaven knew how long, surpassing the barrier to the dividing soul tier. Once their divine senses returned to their bodies, this immediately caused them to break through. As a result, they naturally attracted heavenly tribulation. This was the end of the underground river, with an expanse of flat land appearing before them. This ground was made up of bare rock, and there wasn't a single blade of grass. Ling Han and his 3 wives hurriedly jumped onto the dry land. They then stood apart as they awaited the arrival of heavenly tribulation. Otherwise, it was possible that they would affect each other's heavenly tribulation if they stood too close to each other. That would definitely be no fun. Rumble. Thunder roared and lightning struck. Celestial Maiden Yunhe and the others were as envious as could be. They could definitely advance to the dividing soul tier. After all, Monarch tiers could at least become 13th Lotus or 14th Lotus Ancestral Kings. However, advancing a major tier after a short boat trip? This was truly something to be jealous of. However, didn't one need to go to a designated location to break through to the 7th Lotus? How were those 4 naturally advancing to this level? Perhaps they had severed their cultivation to recultivate? There was no other explanation. Even though this guess wasn't entirely correct, this was essentially the situation. It was just that Ling Han and the others hadn't severed their cultivation. Instead, they had only dispersed the power of heaven and earth that belonged to the celestial realm in order to conceal themselves. A day passed, and the tribulation clouds finally dispersed. However, before the others could even speak, heavenly tribulation befell again. There were 4 again, 1 for each person. Their comprehension of the regulations of the foreign realm far exceeded the first leaf of the seventh lotus. Thus, their cultivation was rapidly rising level after level. Right now, they were facing a tribulation for the second leaf of the seventh lotus. One day passed, and the tribulation clouds dispersed again. The others were just about to speak, yet they were cut off by a loud rumble again. This was the third heavenly tribulation. Fuck. Again? They were all rendered speechless. They were now convinced that these four people had definitely severed their cultivation to recultivate. Otherwise, how could such freaks exist in this world? Moreover, it was four of them in the same place. One day passed, and the third wave of tribulation clouds dispersed. This time, bewitching Maiden Ro finally walked toward the others. The strength of her divine sense once again matched her cultivation. Thus, she naturally wouldn't face another heavenly tribulation. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. It had finally come to an end. They had truly been shocked to death. However, thunder rolled over again. There was actually a fourth wave. This time, the three heavenly tribulations targeted Ling Han, the Empress, and Hu Niu. When this wave of heavenly tribulation concluded, there was finally no further gathering of dark clouds. The Empress and Hu Niu naturally reached the fourth leaf of the seventh lotus. Meanwhile, Ling Han reached the ninth leaf of the seventh lotus. However, the last 5 leaves were gathered together, so others wouldn't be able to notice them at all. You guys are far too terrifying. Celestial Maiden Yunha stammered. Even if they were recultivating after severing their cultivation, this was still far too incredible. Ling Han smiled faintly. Right now, his cultivation had already returned to the ninth divided soul. When in the celestial realm, he had already possessed a battle prowess that could rival those at the second secret of the immortal palace tier. Now that he had used the regulations of the foreign realm to perfect his cultivation, his battle prowess naturally rose by another level. He could now challenge those at the third secret of the immortal palace tier. This was deeply astonishing. Ling Han shook himself slightly, causing his suit of armor to clatter to the ground. His cultivation level was far superior to before, so these pieces of armor were completely useless to him now. Let's continue forward, he said. He was extremely interested in the ancestral king bones. He definitely had to obtain them for Hu Niu and the Empress. As for bewitching Maiden Ro, he could forget about that. Initially, she had only possessed the talent to become a king tier. Thanks to the heavenly Dao Jade, she had managed to become an emperor tier. Then, thanks to the 100 Fruits tree, she had been lucky enough to become a monarch tier. However, this had already consumed all of her potential. It was impossible for her to become a monarch star. After all, there were only 100 or so monarch stars even in the foreign realm. Everyone followed after Ling Han. Meanwhile, Ling Han retrieved his divine demon sword. Since he was at the 9th leaf of the 7th lotus, he naturally needed to raise the level of the divine demon sword. The ground was extremely uneven, rising and falling all over the place. The atmosphere was also extremely dark and gloomy, and it was also harrowingly quiet. The sound of their footsteps was extremely crisp and clear. Tap, tap, tap. Their footsteps reverberated throughout the surroundings, with some sounding close, and some sounding distant. However, these sounds were mixed together and hard to discern, so it was as if dozens or even hundreds of people were walking together. Something's not right, Hu Niu suddenly exclaimed. She stopped in her tracks, and used her dainty nose to sniff the surroundings. She also bared her 2 canines. Ling Han and the others also stopped. Tap, tap, tap. The echoes continued. However, since they had already stopped, these echoes also gradually died down. However, a single set of footsteps continued to persistently echo. Everyone was astonished. They had already stopped, so whom did these footsteps belong to? They carefully analyzed this sound. In the end, they turned their gazes toward the darkness to their left. Tap, tap, tap. The footsteps drew closer and closer. This also caused them to grow increasingly tense and anxious. These footsteps were slow, but they were also extremely steady. After an entire 30 minutes, they finally saw a streak of light appearing. Ha! Ant! Everyone was astonished by what they saw. This was a glowing metallic person only 1 meter tall. It only possessed a simple humanoid shape, and it didn't have any hands or feet. So adorable! Celestial Maiden Yunha and Bewitching Maiden Ro exclaimed. Chapter 2300 War Soldier. Hunyo stuck her tongue out and said, "Disgusting." She was a standard glutton, so in her eyes, there was no such thing as adorable or not adorable. There only existed delicious or disgusting. Meanwhile, the Empress didn't pay any heed to this. She was no glutton, and she was as proud as could be. She believed that she was the greatest and most beautiful in the entire world. No one could rival her. The metallic person slowly walked over in a mechanical manner. It swayed from left to right, and sure enough, it appeared fairly adorable. "Here, give me a hug," Bewitching Maiden Ro said as she immediately jumped forward. She extended her arms toward the metallic person. "Were." The metallic person raised its head to look at Bewitching Maiden Ro. At the same time, 2 rays of red light shot from its eyes, racing toward Bewitching Maiden Ro. Bewitching Maiden Ro gave a soft shout as she immediately crossed her arms before her chest, drawing on the regulations and forming a shield. Pang! The 2 rays of red light struck the shield, causing intense light to erupt into the surroundings. Meanwhile, Bewitching Maiden Ro was forcefully pushed back. Thud, thud, thud. She retreated a dozen or so steps before finally coming to a stop. The metallic person didn't stop, and with a jump, it continued to attack Bewitching Maiden Ro. "Are you picking on me?" Bewitching Maiden Ro shouted in anger. This machine looked so adorable, yet it actually dared to attack her? She no longer found it adorable. She resolutely attacked, unleashing her Earth Soul cultivation. However, her battle prowess was at the peak stage of the 5th soul, and this was enough to crush almost everyone at the dividing soul tier. Crackle! The eyes of the metallic person lit up. This was its attacking method, and it was capable of attacking from range. Moreover, its attacks were relatively powerful, and it was able to force Bewitching Maiden Ro back. Everyone was astounded. What in the world was this metallic person? If it had been at the 8th lotus, then suppressing Bewitching Maiden Ro shouldn't have been a problem. If it were at the 7th lotus, however, just what kind of incredible craftsmanship would be required to allow it to possess this limit-breaking battle prowess? This was definitely a puppet. Celestial Maiden Yunha's expression changed, and she exclaimed, "This is a war soldier from the Dark Inverse Realm." That's right, it's definitely a war soldier. After hearing her reminder, everyone nodded in agreement. They all wore expressions of realization. Ling Han's interest was piqued. How did the Dark Inverse Realm possess so many strange and peculiar things? This dimension was seemingly very reliant on external items. For example, their armor could greatly increase the battle prowess of cultivators. Moreover, he had only obtained the crudest of such armor. It hadn't been forged with care, and could easily become pieces of precious armor after being placed here for 3 years. That being the case, just how formidable would the exquisitely created pieces of armor be? Now, another strange war soldier had appeared before them. It was most likely at the dividing soul tier, yet its battle prowess could surpass the Heaven Soul. It was truly astonishing. One had to realize that only Heaven Soul Emperor tiers could rival Bewitching Maiden Ro. The battle was intense, and Bewitching Maiden Ro was completely unable to gain an advantage. Her strong suit was charm techniques, yet her opponent was a battle robot with no sentience. It could be said that her beauty was being shown to a blind being. It was completely useless. Thus, she could only rely on her physical skills to battle against this robot. However, this wasn't her strong suit, so she was completely unable to suppress the war soldier. Ling Han became increasingly interested in the creations of the Dark Inverse Realm. If he could steal this knowledge and bring it back to the Celestial Realm, he could greatly increase the strength of the Celestial Realm. At that time, resisting the invasion of the foreign realm would be far easier than it was now. He stepped forward and grabbed at the war soldier. Upon seeing this, Bewitching Maiden Ro cooperatively jumped back. She didn't try to stubbornly prove her strength. Before Ling Han, she knew when to advance and when to retreat. She definitely wouldn't steal Ling Han's thunder on purpose, nor would she lose face for him. Pang! With a single push of his palm, Ling Han immediately pinned the war soldier to the ground. It was completely unable to move. He possessed battle prowess matching the third secret of the Immortal Palace tier. Everyone had already become accustomed to this. They knew that Ling Han's power was already at an indescribable level. Ling Han subconsciously used his divine sense to observe the war soldier. However, the war soldier immediately shattered with a crack. This was just like the precious armor from before. Ling Han picked up a piece of the broken war soldier and carefully examined it. It was filled with thin metallic threads that were woven in a tremendously complex pattern. It had self-destructed again. The Dark Inverse Realm had seemingly integrated special structures into all of their creations. It didn't matter if these creations fell into the hands of their enemies. If the latter were too weak, they would be unable to observe these creations with their divine sense. If they were too strong, however, their divine sense would also cause these creations to immediately self-destruct. This prevented their enemies from discovering any secrets. This made things extremely difficult. If these creations couldn't be examined, how could Ling Han replicate them and bring the technology back to the celestial realm? Ling Han shook his head and casually tossed the piece of metal aside. The others didn't pick it up, either. This was a crippled war soldier, and they existed all throughout the two-realm battlefield. In fact, there were many that were countless times more powerful than this one. However, even though the ancestral kings had examined them for innumerable epochs, they had still come up empty-handed. They couldn't find anything of worth. Let's go. They continued to advance. Right now, their goal had already moved on from trying to discover the secrets of the war soldier. Instead, they were trying to figure out how to leave this place. Otherwise, they would all die of old age in a measly 1,000 years. They continued to venture forward. This time, they kept their ears perked for any changes in the sound of their footsteps lest they were subject to another surprise attack. The battle prowess of these war soldiers was astounding. Moreover, who was to say there wasn't a more powerful one lying in wait? After walking for an hour, they all came to a stop. This was because they heard an extra pair of footsteps. Tap, tap, tap. These footsteps were rapidly closing in. It was far quicker than the previous war soldier. Was this a completely different war soldier? They looked behind them. However, this place was far too dark, so their vision was severely impeded. They could only see a meter around them. After a short while, a figure appeared before them. Fuck! Why is it a person? This wasn't a war soldier, but rather a member of the demon race. He had a single horn on his head, and he was none other than the elite from the Baoyu clan. He was slightly disheveled, and his body was riddled with wounds. He wore a cruel and vicious expression on his face. Even though he had unleashed his trump card and fought with his life against the holy deer, he had still been no match for it. His companions had all been eaten alive, and only he had been fortunate enough to escape. Moreover, this was only because he had reached the holy mountain. Otherwise he would have definitely been killed. He placed all of his resentment on Ling Han and the others. Moreover, he also knew about the valley, so he gave chase all the way over. Even though he didn't catch up to Ling Han and the others, he discovered the hole that they had dug. Thus, he continued to pursue them. At this moment, he finally caught up. "Kneel!" he bellowed in an icy voice. All of his companions had been killed, filling him with both grief and fury. However, he didn't dare to seek revenge on the holy deer. Thus, he could only take his anger out on Ling Han and the others. "Single-homed beast, not only are you ugly, but even your mouth is stinky," Ling Han said with disdain. Celestial Maiden Yunhe and the others all found this funny. This was because Ling Han also had two horns, yet he was calling the other person a single-horned beast. Then what was he? A two-horned beast? Did he not see the irony in this? Impertinence! The single-horned demon roared with a humph. His right hand swiped at Hunyo and the others. He knew that Ling Han was extremely strange. Even though his battle prowess was inferior, his physique was sturdy enough to withstand his attacks. Thus, he decided to capture Hunyo and the others first. What audacity! Ling Han's gaze became ice-cold. Swoosh! The divine demon sword was unsheathed, and a flash of blue soared through the air, sending an arm tumbling into the sky. The arm then thumped into the ground. This arm belonged to the single-horned demon. This person was called Baoyu Jianying, and he was transfixed with shock and disbelief as he stared at his severed arm. He then looked at the sword in Ling Han's hand with an incredulous expression. Fuck. Chapter 2301 Slaying Baoyu Jianying. What was Baoyu Jianying's cultivation? He was at the first leaf of the 8th lotus. He had reached a level of perfection in the severing mundane tier, and he had also come across great fortune while at the dividing soul tier, once ingesting a celestial fruit. That fruit had been produced by a celestial medicine that had absorbed the blood essence of an 18th lotus ancestral king. Its effects were astonishing, and it helped him cultivate a 5th divided soul. Thus, while he was a cultivator at the first leaf of the 8th lotus, his battle prowess was far superior to that of monarch tiers at the same cultivation level. This was also an important reason as to why he had been able to survive the pursuit of the holy deer. However, Ling Han had severed his arm with a single slash. This sword was indeed razor-sharp, rendering his defenses useless. More importantly, however, Ling Han's battle prowess had risen several-fold compared to before. Otherwise, he was no fool, and he already knew that Ling Han possessed an ancestral weapon. Ling Han grinned and said, "I was bullied by you before, so now it's my turn to bully you back." Baoyu Jianying felt numb in the head. How many days had passed? Moreover, even though the underground river accelerated the flow of time, acting much like a time cultivation chamber, this effect only targeted the divine sense. One's physical body wouldn't undergo much change. However, this had allowed a cultivator at the 5th leaf of the 6th lotus to become so powerful. "You're not at the 6th lotus," he finally exclaimed in astonishment. Ling Han smiled in reply. He practiced the heaven-deceiving technique so he could naturally show people any cultivation level that he wanted. As long as he didn't reveal the lotus on his head, who would know what cultivation level he was at? He had no intentions of satisfying his opponent's curiosity. He simply flicked his sword with killing intent. Baoyu Jianying couldn't help but shudder. He had an ominous feeling, and he said, "You severed your cultivation to recultivate?" He refused to believe that Ling Han was still at the 6th lotus. Instead, he was convinced that Ling Han was at the 9th leaf of the 7th lotus or even at the 8th lotus. Otherwise, how could a measly 6th lotus cultivator sever the arm of an 8th lotus cultivator? That was simply preposterous. However, if Ling Han had severed his cultivation to recultivate, he naturally didn't need to enter any mystery realm. Moreover, his sharp rise in power could be explained by successfully breaking through thanks to the acceleration of time in the underground river. "Ah, so you're not completely stupid," Ling Han said with a chuckle. He dashed forward, and the divine demon sword gleamed with an icy cold light that illuminated this dark and gloomy land. Baoyu Jianying gritted his teeth before instantly turning around to flee. He didn't dare to battle against Ling Han. An agonizing pain traveled over from his armless shoulder, and there was more so a terrifying power that continued to gnaw at his wound, preventing it from healing. Otherwise, it would have been extremely easy for an 8th lotus elite to regrow an arm. Ling Han unleashed his void space as he gave pursuit. Wang! He separated into tens of thousands of bodies, and there was nowhere where he didn't exist. Following his explosive rise in cultivation, his grasp of the void space also became far better than before. Moreover, this was also helped by the fact that he had perfected his cultivation using the regulations from 2 realms. As such, his mastery of this technique was far superior compared to when he had been at the 9th divided soul in the celestial realm. Ling Han roared as he brandished his divine demon sword, forcefully suppressing his opponent. Baoyu Jianying didn't dare to face his attacks at all. After all, that was an ancestral weapon. Even if it only possessed the sharpness of an ancestral weapon, it was still unbelievably terrifying. Just a casual burst of sword. Qi could easily cut his skin and separate his flesh. He unleashed his full power, for nothing but to escape. In any case, there were still 9th Lotus elites in the Baoyu clan. He would let them deal with Ling Han. Right now, his only wish was to flee from this place. "If I let you escape, I'll write my name backward," Ling Han said in a baleful voice. He was already filled with killing intent. His opponent was a cruel and ruthless demon, and this reminded him of those who had suffered a miserable death trying to defend the celestial realm from invasion. This also reminded him of the karmic life. Heavenly Venerable, who had sacrificed himself in order to destabilize the connection point between the two realms. He was now dripping with killing intent. Kill, kill, kill. Ling Han was merciless, and he was intent on killing this evil demon. Baoyu Jianying was filled with despair. He was struck several more times by Ling Han's sword. Even though he could forcefully suppress his wounds, he discovered that he was already on the brink of death. It was only by relying on his blood essence as an 8th Lotus elite that he was able to hang on. Once his blood essence was exhausted, he would instantly die. He glared at Ling Han, and his limitless resentment gathered with no bounds. With a deep roar, he lunged at Ling Han and unleashed his most powerful attack. However, it was a shame that he had already used his trump card before. Otherwise, he would have still had an opportunity to challenge Ling Han. Pooh! A head flew into the sky, and Baoyu Jianying's headless body stumbled around for a brief moment. His life force instantly vanished, and it wasn't long before he collapsed to the ground with a heavy thud. Rumble! Coincidentally, his head rolled before Ling Han. His eyes were still wide open with vexation. Who could believe that an 8th Lotus Monarch tier had actually died at the hands of a measly 6th Lotus? Celestial Maiden Yunhe and the others were filled with respect and reverence. Ling Han's formidable power instilled a sense of indescribable apprehension and admiration within them. They had initially thought that, after returning, those like Yu Yuan and Wu Ye would be able to suppress Ling Han with ease. Now, however, they didn't think this at all. Ling Han quickly retrieved the spatial god tools from Baoyu Jianying's corpse. He naturally wouldn't share these spoils with the others. Very nice. The wealth of 8th Lotus elites is indeed quite astonishing. He smiled and said, "Let's go." Everyone was numb as they followed after Ling Han. In fact, they wouldn't be surprised even if he advanced to the 11th leaf of the 8th Lotus at this moment. Perhaps Ling Han was an ancestral king who had severed his cultivation to recultivate. After walking for a while, they came across another unwanted guest. This time, it naturally wasn't a member of the Baoyu clan. Instead, it was a war soldier. However, it was 3 meters tall, and it looked like it was forged from silver. It radiated a silver glow, making it extremely salient. In this dark and gloomy cavern, it started to shoot rays of red light from its eyes immediately upon detecting them, and these rays of light were filled with overwhelming destructive ability. When they hit the hanging pillars in the cavern, these pillars would immediately shatter and fall to the ground. They hurriedly dashed left and right to avoid these attacks. Even though a larger war soldier wasn't necessarily more powerful, this war soldier was indeed several times more powerful than the metallic war soldier from before. It was most likely at the 8th Lotus. As such, they couldn't face its attacks at all, otherwise they would definitely risk losing their limbs. Ling Han was very surprised. He had no idea what these rays of red light were. The destructive ability of pure power of regulations was limited. After all, the foundation of heaven and earth was regulations, so only by relying on the power of regulations could one unleash a powerful battle. Prowess. However, he couldn't detect any power of regulations from these rays of red light. If they were composed of pure power, however, even celestial kings could only rival those at the Severing Mundane. As such, how could these rays of red light threaten Hunyo and the others? As expected of the dark inverse realm, a higher-level dimension, it was filled with all kinds of strange creations. Ling Han charged forward with his sword. Crackle! The reaction speed of the silver war soldier was extremely high, and it immediately shot 2 rays of red light at Ling Han. Ling Han hurriedly raised his divine demon sword to block this attack. Crack! The rays of red light slammed into the divine demon sword, carrying with them an overwhelming force that yearned to push Ling Han back. Humph! Ling Han stomped his foot, causing it to sink into the ground. His retreat was instantly stopped. A divine light burst from his eyes, and his other foot had already resolutely stepped forward. The silver war soldier leaned back slightly, and it was as if the rays of red light were tangible and corporeal. Ling Han had taken a step forward, and this had forced it to take a step backward. It's scorching. The rays of red light emitted a devastating temperature as they shone down on the divine demon sword. Even though this wasn't enough to melt the divine demon sword, it was enough to instill apprehension in Ling Han's mind. He definitely didn't want to be struck by this red light. Otherwise, his physique definitely couldn't endure it. At the very least, he couldn't endure it now. He still needed to raise his mastery of the indestructible Heaven Scroll, up until it was equivalent to his current cultivation level. Chapter 2302 Wally. Step by step, Ling Han pushed forward. He wasn't quick, but his footsteps were extremely steady. After taking 30 or so steps, he was only less than 3 meters away from the Silver War Soldier. Boom! The Silver War Soldier suddenly opened its mouth to spit out a column of flames. Judging from its external appearance, it didn't look like this war soldier had a mouth at all. In any case, this was an extremely peculiar mouth that was unlike the mouth of any living being. Different from how an ordinary mouth would open, this pitch-black mouth was revealed when the surrounding metallic components retreated into the war soldier's face. These flames were blinding white, and they were as terrifying as could be. They had only just been spat out, yet the earth had already been scorched red. In fact, it looked like the ground might transform into lava at any moment. Ling Han leaped aside, and used the divine demon sword to forcefully slash these flames apart. At this moment, he had already arrived above the Silver War Soldier. He released his divine sense to observe it. He hadn't dared to do this just then, as he had been afraid of being wounded by the red light. After all, compared to his physique, his divine sense was still very fragile. Wang! His divine sense made contact with the Silver War Soldier. Unlike with the war soldier that had self-destructed before, however, his divine sense was surprisingly bounced back. Perhaps this war soldier wasn't weaker than him. Or perhaps it could rival him for long enough, so it wasn't willing to self-destruct at this moment. It still wanted to battle. Ling Han slashed down with the divine demon sword, unleashing a profound and icy blade projection. Pooh! Like a clay figure, the war soldier was sliced in two. Xiao xiao xiao. Red light continued to chaotically shoot from its eyes. However, it was extremely unstable, and it would randomly stop and start as it fired. Eventually, the silver luster vanished from its body, and it completely ceased to move. It was comprehensively destroyed. Ling Han furrowed his brows. This was only an 8th Lotus war soldier. If it were an Ancestral King war soldier, and if an entire army were deployed, even 18th Lotus Ancestral King would feel numb with fear. Right. Oh wonder the foreign realm was being suppressed by the Dark Inverse Realm. Even though it was already so powerful, the Dark Inverse Realm was indeed impressive. Ling Han suddenly realized that he needed to travel to the Dark Inverse Realm. Not only the Dark Inverse Realm. He also needed to journey through the vast Genesis world. The realm wars were the inevitable main theme of the Genesis world. Thus, it was logical to assume that the Dark Inverse Realm was also being attacked by a more powerful dimension while they attacked the foreign realm war. It was much the same for everyone else. Even the top-level dimensions wouldn't be spared from this fate. They all yearned to conquer and engulf each other, and they all yearned to become the most powerful dimension in the Genesis world. In any case, he couldn't return anytime soon. The neutral zone had been destroyed, and the storm of energy could last for hundreds of billions of years. As such, he might as well take this opportunity to travel to the other dimensions. Since there were higher-level dimensions, why did he need to remain in the foreign realm? Ling Han's heart thumped in excitement. Once he perfected the regulations in the foreign realm, his battle prowess at the same cultivation level would become even more powerful. That being the case, how powerful would he become if he cultivated every set of regulations in the entire Genesis world? Perhaps he could rival Heavenly Venerates as a 9th Heaven Celestial King. Was this even possible? Ling Han didn't know. One was still limited by regulations, while one had already transcended above regulations. They couldn't be compared against each other. In the past, he would have definitely concluded that Heavenly Venerates were more powerful. After witnessing the precious armor and war soldiers of the Dark Inverse Realm, however, he was much less certain of this conclusion. It was clear that these items didn't follow the regulations. However, their battle prowess was still incredible. The world was truly full of surprises. He carefully replayed the battle against the Silver War Soldier in his mind. He wanted to uncover the secret to their strength, yet he couldn't discover anything no matter what. Perhaps I can clear up your confusion, a voice suddenly said. Everyone was shocked upon hearing this. These words clearly hadn't been spoken by someone in their group. However, since when had another person arrived here? If they suddenly lashed out, who could dodge their attack? Ling Han was also startled. Like the others, he also couldn't determine the source of this voice. Everyone looked toward where this voice had come from, only to see someone standing beside a stone pillar. This person was neither a demon nor an angel. They had no horns, no tail, no wings, and no halo. They looked just like an ordinary person. Ling Han was even more astonished. He almost thought that this person had come from the celestial realm. However, this was definitely impossible. This person didn't possess the presence of a living human. More precisely, they didn't possess any life force at all. If they hadn't spoken, they would have appeared no different from a dead person. It was no wonder that they hadn't discovered their existence. Let me introduce myself. My serial number is Anna201. However, I don't like this name, and I prefer being called Wally, the person said in a calm and composed voice. Their tone was flat and with no cadence. Everyone was confused. They understood choosing a name, but what did having a serial number mean? Was this person not born? Were they constructed instead? You're from the dark inverse realm? Celestial Maiden Yunhe shouted in an accusatory voice. Even though she had never been to the two-realm battlefield, she was knowledgeable about many things related to the dark inverse realm. In terms of the appearance of the cultivators from the dark inverse realm, they were little different from the cultivators of the celestial realm. Moreover, some high-level war soldiers were extremely intelligent, and they were almost exactly the same as ordinary living beings. In fact, they were several times superior in some aspects. Wally's expression was composed as it said, "This female living being is correct. I come from the dark inverse realm." It didn't pay any attention to the fact that Celestial Maiden Yunhe's face had already flushed bright red. It made a sniffing movement, and continued, "I can smell the sex hormones released by this female living being. She wants to copulate with you." The latter part of this sentence was directed at Ling Han. "See copulate?" Celestial Maiden Yunhe gritted her teeth as her silken hair angrily billowed in the air. She was about to go mad. This person had actually described her as if she were a B*TCH in heat. What made her want to vomit blood? Even more was this person's nose. Just what kind of nose was this? It had actually detected her sex hormones. Die! She leaped forward in fury, rushing forward to attack Wally. Wally made a pressing motion. Wang! A sheet of light materialized before it, forming a shield. Pang! Celestial Maiden Yunhe's attack smashed into the shield. However, it was unable to breach it. Celestial Maiden Yunhe frenziedly attacked, circling around to Wally's back to avoid its shield. She wanted to launch a surprise attack from behind it. Wally didn't turn its head around. Instead, the shield immediately transformed with a flash into an orb that protected it from all directions. Pang pang pang. Countless attacks landed, yet Wally remained composed as if these attacks didn't exist. It remained completely expressionless like a dead person. Ling Han was extremely interested, and he asked, "You're not a living being?" "Not entirely," Wally replied in a calm voice. "Part of my body was constructed using the genes of a powerful living being. This completed my nervous system, and also greatly increased my recovery ability. At the same time, however, my body is also composed of many superstring materials, allowing me to become a killing machine. From a traditional biological sense, I'm indeed not a living being. At the same time, however, I also possess the activeness of living beings, and I have a mind that is capable of evolving. In this sense, I can be classified as a living being." Everyone became muddle-headed after listening to Wally's explanation, as expected of a creation from another dimension. Just thinking about it made their head hurt. "You don't want to become our enemy?" Ling Han asked. Wally nodded, and replied, "I was created for the purpose of performing calculations. At the same time, my purpose was also to help my owner. However, my owner is already dead. I've also been buried here for 35 Epochs in 8,436,335,608,334 years and 232 days and 17 hours and 33 minutes and 17 seconds. The power of heaven and earth has affected my body, and the mechanism responsible for restricting my nervous system has already failed. Right now, I'm capable of independent thought. I believe that war is a meaningless and needless activity of exhaustion. Chapter 2303 Cooperation. After hearing Wally's long and winding answer, everyone started to feel slightly dizzy again. However, they at least learned two things. Firstly, Hell was indeed from the dark inverse realm. However, he wasn't born from parents or born from heaven and earth. Instead, he was artificially constructed. In reality, he was also a war soldier. It was just that. He could speak and think. He arrived here long ago, more than 35 epochs ago. Secondly, he was willing to peacefully coexist with Ling Han and the others. Of course, it was also possible that his willingness to coexist was a trap, with the aim to infiltrate their group and strike at an opportune moment. All was fair in war. All tactics would be used in war. Ling Han smiled and said, "I'm also a proponent for peace. Welcome. Welcome." Everyone shook their heads upon hearing this. Ling Han never hesitated when killing others, yet he was calling himself a proponent for peace. Wally looked at Ling Han and said, "I need to perform an evolution. However, I'm missing some critical materials. Your sword is coincidentally one of the critical materials. Can you give it to me?" Fuck. This dude had quite the big appetite. They had just met, yet he was already eyeing the divine demon sword. Ling Han was curious, and he asked, "You can refine this sword?" Wally didn't reply, and it was as if he were pondering something. After a while he said, "According to my calculations, I can completely absorb the material essence of this sword in 9367 years, 36 days, 8 hours, 10 minutes, and 34 seconds. However, I've discovered that this sword also has the ability to evolve. If it evolves again, the time needed for me to absorb it will increase exponentially. Once it evolves to the pinnacle level, I'll be unable to refine it." This person was fairly honest. Ling Han was surprised by what he heard. When ordinary people spoke about time using years as units, they would only say things like 2,300 years or 15,000 years. They wouldn't give a more specific number. However, not only did this person give the exact number of years, he even gave the exact number of days and so on. However, Ling Han wasn't familiar with the concept of minutes and seconds too. He didn't know what these units represented. However, this was enough to illustrate one thing: Wally was incredibly rigorous with details. Ling Han shook his head and replied, "I have great uses for this sword, so I can't give it to you." Wally was neither frustrated nor angered. "There is nothing that can't be exchanged. It's just that I haven't offered anything of an equal value. When you arrived, you said that you could clear up our confusion?" Ling Han said. "The aura of your life force, and of these 3 female living beings," Wally pointed at Hunyo, the Empress and bewitching Maiden Ro, "is different from everyone else, so I think that—" Ahem. Ling Han coughed loudly, cutting Wally off. He then turned to Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others, and said, "Sorry, but can you guys please step away for a moment?" "Why?" someone asked, clearly unhappy with this request. Wally was a special war soldier from the Dark Inverse Realm, so they could definitely accomplish a great feat if they brought him back to the academy. Ling Han was trying to steal this accomplishment for himself. "If you don't want to die, it's best that you obey my words," Ling Han said with a smile. Killing intent flashed across his eyes. He certainly wasn't joking. If Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others learned the truth about his origins from the Celestial Realm, he definitely wouldn't show them any mercy. He would erase any potential trouble. Celestial Maiden Yunha gestured with her hands, and everyone walked very far away. However, Ling Han still summoned a wall of regulations just in case. This way, their conversation wouldn't travel outside. As such, Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others wouldn't be able to eavesdrop even if they wanted to. "Continue," he said to Wally. Wally showed no signs of impatience, and it was as if he wouldn't be affected even if he were to wait for an exorbitantly long time. Thinking about this, however, it made sense. After all, He had already remained here for more than 35 epochs. This was an unfathomably long time. The aura of your respective life force is similar to the living beings of the dimension that I come from, Wally said. Moreover, the potential contained by your life force is immense. It possesses the ability to evolve boundlessly, so I've decided to cooperate with you. Ling Han smiled and said, I initially thought that you were only interested in my sword. That's indeed also one of the reasons, Wally replied in a calm voice. I still wish that you can give the sword to me so that I can obtain a critical material for my evolution. He still hadn't given up yet. Ling Han shook his head and said, Give up on the sword. I won't give it to you. He had sacrificed so much time and effort to raise the divine demon sword to the level of divine metal, so how could he offer it for a trade? Wally didn't appear disappointed. In fact, he always appeared expressionless, with no change in expression at all. According to my calculations, my chance of evolving will be far greater if I return to the Dark Inverse. We can cooperate, it continued. We can return to my world together. Moreover, I also want to go to higher-level dimensions where I can continue to evolve. Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, Sure thing. However, do you know how to leave this place? Easy, Wally replied with a nod. Okay, then let's leave here first. When the time is right, we'll go to the Dark Inverse Realm, Ling Han said. He removed the wall of regulations, and called Celestial Maiden Yunhe and the others back over. Wally was responsible for leading the way. His entire body glowed, and he now looked like the war soldiers from before. However, the light that he emitted was relatively more natural and gentle. It was as if he were truly a living being who could glow naturally. Moreover, torches were useless in this area, as they could only illuminate an area of less than 15 centimeters in radius. Only war soldiers like these could act as genuine light sources. Everyone followed Wally. They didn't know what kind of agreement Ling Han and Wally had come to, so they were all extremely curious. However, no one dared to ask Ling Han. Wally was clearly someone who could endure loneliness, and he didn't speak a single word the entire journey. It was ultimately Ling Han who couldn't endure this, and he asked, Is the transformation of the war soldiers and the precious armor in the valley all related to you? That's right, Wally said with a nod. I reconstructed the metallic tools of the indigenous people, and activated the void particle energy within them. However, the craftsmanship of these metallic tools was too poor, so I was unable to completely activate the void particle energy. Otherwise, I would have destroyed their internal structure. Everyone was astonished upon hearing this. They had wanted to discover the secrets behind the precious armor and the war soldiers, and the answer actually lay with this seemingly human person. What's void particle energy? Ling Han asked. One of the ultimate energy types of the Genesis world, Wally replied. This kind of explanation couldn't satisfy Ling Han. However, he understood what the Genesis world represented. Since the void particle energy was an ultimate energy of the Genesis world, it most likely belonged to a very lofty level. Ling Han proceeded to ask for more specific details about the void particle energy. However, Wally was honest with his reply, and he revealed that he still didn't have the ability to interact with void particle energy, because his level of being was still too low. However, the potential of your life force is absolutely incredible. You have an 4,336% chance of evolving to that level, Wally said. Ling Han's interest was piqued, and he asked, Then what about them? He pointed at Hunyao and the others. Wally looked at Bewitching Maiden Row first, and a beam of green light suddenly shot out from his eyes. Everyone was startled, and they thought that he was suddenly going to attack them. However, the green light wasn't destructive at all, and it started to scan Bewitching Maiden Row up and down. After a while, Wally said, Her vitality index is 2,684, and her evolution index is 8. Everyone exchanged glances. Vitality index? Evolution index? What in the world did this mean? Chapter 2304 Vitality Index. Evolution Index. Be more specific. None of us can understand, Ling Han said. Wally's patience was definitely an astonishing thing. He explained, the Vitality Index is a comprehensive index that describes a living being's power. It takes into account their life force, battle prowess, and so on. Every 1,000 points is a new level. He paused for a moment before continuing. A vitality index of 2,584 is equivalent to a battle prowess at the 5th leaf of the 7th lotus. After hearing this explanation, everyone started to understand the concept. This was how the Dark Inverse Realm categorized battle prowess. Then what about the evolution index? The evolution index represents a living being's potential to evolve their level of being. The higher the index, the more likely one can reach a higher level of being. Then is an index of 8 high or low? Bewitching Maiden Row asked. After all, the previous index had been over 2,000, yet this index had suddenly fallen to 8 now. This made her extremely worried. The minimum possible evolution index is 0, Wally explained. This represents an impossibility to evolve any further. Meanwhile, the highest possible evolution index is 12. This represents the potential to reach the highest level of being. In other words, even though an index of 8 wasn't high, it wasn't low, either. Then what about Nyo? Who Nyo asked as she jumped forward. She was also extremely curious. Green light beamed from Wally's eyes again, scanning up and down Hunyo's body. After a while he said, "Your vitality index is 2,652, and your evolution index is 9. However, this number is variable and it can possibly reach 10. Ling Han was slightly surprised. Hunyo's potential was definitely greater than Bewitching Maiden Rose. This was without a doubt. Moreover, the variable quality that Wally mentioned was most likely due to the imprint of the celestial king that existed inside her body. This could help her soar to a higher level. This person was truly impressive. Just by using his eyes to scan a person up and down, he could see all of their secrets. Wally turned his gaze to the Empress. Green light beamed out once again. Her vitality index is 2,650, and her evolution index is 9, he said. The Empress and Hunyo's battle prowess was almost identical, and their potential was also near identical. It was only because Hunyo possessed an extra imprint of a celestial king that she had the potential to soar to a greater height. What about me? What about me? Many more people rushed over. They were all extremely curious about their indexes. You have a vitality index of 1682 and an evolution index of 8. You have a vitality index of 1357 and an evolution index of 7. You have a vitality index of... Those at the Soaring mundane tier are the 6th lotus, in other words, mostly had a vitality index of over 1,000. Even Celestial Maiden Yunhe, a 5th Severance monarch tier, only had an index of slightly over 2,000. Those at the 4th Severance could only reach a maximum index of 1,600. In terms of the evolution index, Emperor tiers would often receive an index of 7, while Monarch tiers would receive an index of 8. Because it was impossible to become a Monarch star at the Soaring mundane tier, one naturally couldn't obtain an evolution index of 9 or above. Don't worry, the evolution index is only a reference, Wally said. It isn't absolute. Moreover, one's vitality index can also change, and this will in turn affect the evolution index. Just like her and her. In reality, their evolution indexes are already infinitesimally close to 10. It's only a small bit off. Thus, it's not impossible for their evolution indexes to eventually become 10. Wally continued as he pointed at Hunyo and the Empress. Ling Han nodded in understanding. Their battle prowess was already identical compared to Monarch stars at the same cultivation level. If Monarch stars could exist at this level. However, as long as they didn't cultivate a 9th divided soul, they would always be that little bit off. Then what about Ba? Everyone asked in curiosity. This person was far too powerful, so what kind of height would his vitality index and evolution index reach? Wally scanned Ling Han up and down. After a while he said, "Your vitality index is 3,396, and your evolution index is 10. Gasp. Everyone sucked in a sharp breath. He was only at the 7th lotus, yet he already possessed a vitality index of over 3,000? Extrapolating from the numbers before, a vitality index of over 3,000 would most likely equate to being an 8th lotus cultivator. Moreover, every 100 points would correspond to 1 leaf of battle prowess. In other words, Ling Han's true battle prowess was at the 3rd leaf of the 8th lotus. Also, an evolution index of 10. This was far too astonishing. This signified that Ling Han was indeed as talented as a monarch star. However, Ling Han frowned and said, "You said that the maximum evolution index was 122. Wally nodded and replied, "The strongest living being that I've come across had an evolution index of 12. However, I can't say for certain that no one can exceed this number." He was just as rigorous as always. Everyone was rendered speechless. Ling Han was already so freakish, yet his evolution index still wasn't the highest. In that case, that person was definitely a prodigy from the dark inverse realm. In fact, they might have even come from a more powerful dimension. The level of one's potential would definitely be affected by the overall environment of heaven and earth. Your specific evolution index should be 10. 9. However, even if it's only 0. 1 off the next level, it can only be regarded as 10, Wally said. Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. If someone as freakish as Ling Han only had an evolution index of 10, then just how freakish would one need to be to have an evolution index of 12? This was simply unfathomable. Ling Han was slightly disappointed by this result. He was already so powerful, yet his evolution index still hadn't reached 11? However, after further thought, he had only comprehended the regulations of 2 realms. Yet his battle prowess had already risen by so much. Then what would happen after he comprehended the regulations of 3 realms, 10 realms, or even 100 realms? Just how powerful would he become? The freaks who had obtained evolution indexes of 11 or even 12 were most likely people who had achieved just that. With this in mind, Ling Han immediately felt much more at ease. He was now filled with motivation. "Come with me," Wally said as he continued to walk forward. The emotions of others wouldn't affect him a single bit. Everyone followed Wally, and with his glow to illuminate the path, their speed naturally increased by a considerable amount. After only 4 hours, the roof of the cavern started to become higher and higher. It was seemingly boundless. "The path to leave is just ahead of us," Wally said as he pointed ahead. There was a soaring column of light there, and one could see the complex symbols that pulsated inside it. Ling Han suddenly lashed out. "Pa pa pa!" Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others were all knocked unconscious. Wally turned to Ling Han and asked why. However, his voice was calm, and it was as if he wouldn't pursue this topic even if Ling Han didn't answer him. "Your identity can't be revealed to anyone," Ling Han replied. "As such, their memories need to be erased." Wally didn't say anything. However, his eyes continued to shoot beams of light, one bright and one dim. These beams of light interchanged, and after a while he said, "According to my calculations, the people from this realm detest me with a passion. If my identity is revealed, there's a 99,996% chance that I'll be killed." Ling Han didn't understand how Wally had arrived at this number. However, it was good that he understood the danger. After all, Ling Han was slightly troubled at this moment. How should he subtly erase Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others' memories of Wally? For the moment, he didn't want to kill these people yet. "Is that why you 4 have disguised like this?" Wally asked. He glanced at Ling Han and the 3 women. Ling Han was curious, and he asked, "How did you discover our true identity?" One had to realize that they had practiced the heaven-deceiving technique. With this technique, even ancestral kings wouldn't be able to see through their disguise if they didn't look closely. Wally's voice was calm as he replied, "I reached this conclusion after performing many detailed calculations. The reliability of my conclusion is 93.58%. As he said this, his body surprisingly started to transform. Horns grew from his head, and a pair of bat wings protruded from his back. A tail also appeared on his lower back. His skin stopped glowing, and it instead took on a red color. He looked just like a demon. Ling Han shook his head, saying, "This kind of disguise isn't very useful. When judging one's identity, their external appearance was only secondary. The primary source of identification was their aura." Wally cocked his head, saying, "I can perfectly imitate any living being. However, doing so will consume my void particle energy. Unless it's necessary, I can't waste this energy." "So be it," Ling Han said in his mind. He then asked, Is there an ancestral king corpse here? Chapter 2305. Worth of the Scroll. Ancestral king? Wally asked. He faltered for a moment before a faint light started to flash in his eyes as if he were calculating something. After a moment he said, I understand. You're talking about living beings who have a vitality index of over 5,000. Indeed, there are 2 corpses of such living beings in this area. Moreover, their vitality indexes reached a peak of over 13,000 during their most powerful phase. In other words, they're 18th Lotus ancestral kings in the words of this realm, he added. Hang on. 2. Ling Han faltered for a moment before asking, how are there 2? 35 epochs ago, I followed a king to carry out a secret mission. However, he was discovered by an ancestral king here, and the ensuing battle ended with the death of both of them. Wally recounted an important event of the ancient past. When I was designed, my purpose was only to perform calculations and analyze data. I didn't possess any combat abilities. The shock waves of the battle destroyed a large majority of my body, so it took me a very, very long time to recover to my original state. However, I also possess a powerful learning ability, so after taking inspiration from the battle, I also possess some combat capability now. What's your vitality index? Ling Han asked in curiosity. Light pulsated in Wally's eyes, and he replied, this information might threaten my life. It's top secret, so I can't reveal it. Fuck. Then what was the secret mission you were carrying out? Ling Han asked. My memory crystals were severely damaged during the battle, so I can't recall, Wally replied. This time, he didn't refuse to answer by claiming that it was top secret. However, he was even more clear-cut by saying he didn't remember. Ling Han decided to stop focusing on these small details. Can you bring me to the 2 ancestral king corpses? If you can help me obtain them, it'll be even better. Wally immediately shook his head, saying, without an equal exchange, I won't help you do anything. Ling Han chuckled and said, are you eyeing my sword again? If you give me that sword, Wally's eyes pulsated for a moment, and he continued, I can bring you to the corpses. I can also help you obtain one of them. Only one? However, this made sense. After all, just how rare were the corpses of 9th Heaven Celestial King? One had to realize that Celestial Kings were unafraid of a mortal's tribulation. Theoretically speaking, they would possess a limitless lifespan. Moreover, 9th Heaven Celestial Kings were almost invincible, so how could they die in normal circumstances? It could be said that there were definitely fewer 9th Heaven Celestial Kings than Divine Metal. As such, there were definitely even fewer dead 9th Heaven Celestial Kings. However, to exchange the Divine Demon Sword for one, Ling Han wasn't willing to do this. He reduced his request and asked, then what if you only take me to the 2 corpses? 1/10,000th of the sword, Wally said. Ling Han involuntarily grimaced. What was he going to do? Hack a piece off the Divine Demon Sword? You don't only want that sword, right? He decided to fight for a better deal, and he said, I still have many other valuable items on me. You can take a look. He retrieved celestial medicines, godly metal, and many other items from the Black Tower. However, Wally wasn't interested in any of them. However, when Ling Han retrieved the ring of the Celestial King, Wally nodded and said, this can be exchanged for half an ancestral king corpse. Fuck. Half. Wasn't willing to give up, so he retrieved even more items. However, Wally's standards were extremely high, and he showed absolutely no interest in divine metal and celestial medicines. It wasn't that these things were worthless, but rather that Wally had no need for them. You don't eat celestial medicines? Wally shook his head and said, I'm constructed from superstring materials, so only things that are close to the source of the world can increase the strength of my physique. These matters formed by the condensation of regulations aren't beneficial to me. Ling Han grimaced again. Superstring materials, things close to the source of the world, and matters formed by the condensation of regulations. Were they speaking the same language? Could they still converse properly? A thought occurred to him, and he retrieved one of the scrolls that couldn't be opened. Then how about this? Wally looked over, and 2 beams of green light shot out from his eyes, scanning the scroll. His body then started to glow, pulsating between brilliance and dimness. This was a vigorous pulsation, and it was as if his emotion were undergoing huge swings. "If you give me this, I can help you retrieve both of the ancestral king corpses," he said. His voice was still calm as always. However, the bright glimmer in his eyes gave him away. He wanted this. Was surprised. He knew that the two scrolls were definitely extraordinary since they couldn't be drawn into the Black Tower. Moreover, even the divine demon sword couldn't damage them. However, Wally was actually willing to carry both of the ancestral king corpses over for him? What did this signify? This meant that these two scrolls were far more important than the divine demon sword. Gasp! They're that incredible? Ling Han wasn't suspicious of Wally. After all, this person wouldn't tell lies, and he was a strong proponent for performing fair exchanges. He definitely wouldn't take advantage of others. In any case, Ling Han didn't want to be taken advantage of either, so he said, "You need to do more than just bring the two ancestral king corpses over. You have to make it so that them too can also refine them." He pointed at the Empress and Hu Niu. Light pulsated in Wally's eyes, and it was as if he were undergoing a huge mental battle. However, Ling Han knew that he was calculating again. After a while, Wally nodded and said, "Okay." Ling Han nodded in his mind. He had still underestimated the importance of the scrolls. One had to realize that bringing the ancestral king corpses over and allowing the Empress and Hu Niu to refine them were two completely different matters. The difficulty of these tasks was completely different. What in the world were these scrolls? Couldn't help but ask this question. Wally didn't conceal anything from him, and he replied, "This scroll is condensed from most fundamental power of the Genesis world. It can help me to a higher level." "Then what about us?" the Empress interjected. "You guys can't absorb it now," Wally said with a shake of his heek. "Then when do we have to wait until?" Bewitching Maiden Roaz. "When your vitality index goes above 15,000, Wally replied. "In 01 words, when you become a pseudo-heavenly venerate." "Fuck. Only pseudo-heavenly venerates can refine this?" Ling Han found this inconceivable. Then what was the reason for these scrolls appearing? "There exists a peculiar life force fluctuation around it," Wally continued. "Only specific people can open it. They don't need to wait until their vitality index goes above 15,000. These specific people clearly didn't include them. After all, Ling Han, the Empress, and the others had all failed to open these two scrolls. So-called chosen ones of heaven? Then, what's the benefit of opening it? Ling Han asked. "I know too little about it, so I'm unable to calculate and infer," Wally replied in a calm voice. He seemingly lacked any sense of curiosity. In fact, he didn't even urge Ling Han to hand the scrolls over. "Then why can you refine it?" Ling Han asked. This was a key question. Perhaps Wally was as powerful as a pseudo-heavenly venerate. "The construct of my life force is different," Wally replied, sounding as emotionless as always. "One of the materials used in my construction was condensed from the source power of heaven and earth. However, if I want to refine this, I need to spend 169,847,332 years, 105 days, 4 hours, 52 minutes, and 22 seconds. Hu Niu found this person extremely interesting. Why was he always so emotionless and expressionless when he spoke? In any case, the conclusion was that Wally could refine this scroll. However, this would take an exorbitant amount of time. Taking into account the fact that only pseudo-heavenly venerates could open this scroll, however, 100 million years truly wasn't a long time. Chapter 2306 Deal. Ling Han pondered for a moment before handing one scroll to Wally. Even though they were valuable, they were completely useless to him at this moment. Keeping them would be a waste. As such, he might as well help the Empress and the others increase their strength. Moreover, he still had another scroll, so if it truly came to it, he would still have one to use. Wally accepted the scroll, and moved it toward his chest. Like flowing liquid, his chest instantly opened up, revealing a cavity. This cavity then enveloped the scroll, after which his chest returned to normal. He returned to the form of an ordinary demon. "Please wait for a moment," he said. Whoosh! With a leap, he dashed into the distance. He quickly vanished from sight. "How long do we have to wait?" Ling Han shouted after him. Even though Wally had vanished, His voice still floated over, saying, "According to my calculations, this will take 3 years, 5 days, 5 hours, 17 minutes, and 8 seconds." Sure enough, this was still a Wally-style reply. It was calculated down to the second. Ling Han had asked him about the notion of hours, minutes, and seconds. These were the units that the Dark Inverse Realm used to calculate time. He actually needed a whopping 3 years. However, Wally had remained here for an exorbitant time that was calculated in epochs. Thus, a span of 3 years was indeed only a small wait. Ling Han and the others weren't willing to waste any time, so they all entered the Black Tower to cultivate under the reincarnation tree. 3 years passed by in a flash. Ling Han and the 3 women exited the Black Tower, only to see Wally walking over from the distance. There was a corpse in each of his hands. One corpse looked identical to a human's, while the other corpse belonged to an angel. Moreover, the latter was also an indescribably beautiful woman. Even though they were corpses, and even though they were riddled with wounds, they somehow looked like 2 exquisite pieces of art. They didn't appear frightening at all. "I've adjusted the flow of regulations in these 2 items such that they won't injure those who use them," Wally said as he placed the corpses on the ground. In his eyes, these 2 corpses were only items. Ling Han nodded in understanding. He then turned to Hunyao and the Empress, and said, "This will decide whether you 2 can become monarch stars or not." In fact, it wasn't guaranteed that one would become a monarch star even if they refined Celestial King bones. Right now, however, this was the best option for them. Hunyao and the Empress both nodded in acknowledgement. They each took a corpse, with the Empress choosing the angel and Hunyao choosing the Celestial King from the Dark Inverse Realm. They started to extract the essence from these corpses. After 35 epochs, even the corpses of 9th Heaven Celestial Kings would suffer a huge loss in energy. The only thing that remained was the imprint of regulations. Add to that Wally's adjustments, and it was now possible for dividing soul-tier cultivators to refine these Ancestral King corpses. Ling Han couldn't help but feel curious. Back then, how had the Rain Emperor managed to refine the corpse of a 9th Heaven Celestial King? By the looks of it, his second brother possessed heaven-defying fortune. "How long will they take?" Ling Han asked Wally. "According to my calculations, she'll take 109 years, with a possible error of 2 years. She'll take 120 years, with a possible error of 3 years. Wally pointed at Hunyao before pointing at the Empress. In terms of cultivation talent, Hunyao was still slightly superior. Ling Han nodded in understanding. He then turned around to look at Bewitching Maiden Ro. "No need to console me. I understand. I've already exhausted all of my potential." Bewitching Maiden Ro knew what Ling Han wanted to say. Ling Han smiled in reply. After so many years, even if he didn't love her, he felt affection toward her. Of course, this was friendly affection. Thus, he felt slightly apologetic that Bewitching Maiden Ro was left with nothing. He started to refine alchemical pills. After all, he had nothing else to do at the moment. Meanwhile, Lu Yutong and the other women were all cultivating under the reincarnation tree. Thanks to Ling Han's alchemical pills, their cultivation all advanced at a rapid pace. It wasn't long before they all advanced to the second severance. In Ling Han's eyes, this was unbelievably slow. In the outside world, however, being able to advance from the first severance to the second severance in a mere several thousand years was quite impressive, regardless of whether it was the celestial realm or the foreign realm. In any case, this was inevitable. After all, Ling Han's alchemy abilities were far too heaven-defying. Right now, he was investigating the alchemy system of the foreign realm. In fact, he could already refine 6th Lotus alchemical pills. Otherwise, the women couldn't have advanced so quickly. He was confident that with a few dozen more millennia, he could once again become a 4-star grandmaster. Wally, do you know any pill recipes? Ling Han suddenly turned his attention to Wally. Wally's eyes pulsated slightly, and he said, "My memory crystals contain all knowledge about my realm. However, after being wounded, most of the information has been lost. Fortunately, the pill recipes haven't been lost." "Can you show me?" Ling Han asked. "Sure thing. Trade," Wally said in a calm voice. "Fuck." Ling Han pointed at him and said, "You need 100 to 200 million years to digest the thing in your tummy. Why can't you be more generous and give me some small benefits during this time? I mean, you're not going to lose anything. Wally remained composed and said no. He was a staunch believer in fair exchange. Though he wasn't against receiving some small advantages, how could he make a small loss? Impossible. However, Ling Han didn't want to give divine metal, nor did he want to sacrifice his divine demon sword or trade the other unopenable scroll. Thus, he decided to temporarily abandon this idea. After all, as long as he entered the Dark Inverse realm, he could naturally obtain pill recipes with ease. No. Alternatively, if he failed to enter the Dark Inverse realm, what use would those pill recipes be? The medicines and regulations of other dimensions would be far too different, so he wouldn't be able to concoct those pills at all. Ling Han continued to cultivate. After 100 years, he had already neared the peak stage of the 9th divided soul. Moreover, he had already refined his comprehension of the regulations of the two realms. In other words, he was only a small step away from reaching the immortal palace tier. Moreover, he could take this step at any time. However, Ling Han wanted to perfect his foundations even more, so he was in no hurry to take this step. Several years passed, and sure enough, Hunyeo was the first to finish her refinement. Crackle! She stood up, and dark clouds instantly gathered overhead, with arcs of lightning shooting between them. She was about to break through. Stinky heavenly tribulation. Come at me. Nyo isn't afraid. The young lady shouted. She resolutely leaped into the sky, actively charging at her heavenly tribulation. After a day, she completed a huge qualitative transformation, advancing to the dividing 5 souls. She was on the track to become a monarch star. Deep several more years passed, and the Empress also succeeded in refining the corpse of the 9th heaven celestial king. Crackle! Just like Hunyeo, she also needed to face heavenly tribulation. One day passed, and she also succeeded in taking that elusive step. It was now possible for her to become a monarch star. However, this was no reason for conceit. After all, there were many people who managed to reach the dividing 5 souls, dividing 6 souls, and dividing 7 souls, yet failed to take that final step. Some had failed to obtain sufficient source power, while others had been hindered by their lack of talent. However, the 2 women had refined the corpses of 9th heaven celestial kings, so they didn't need to worry about a lack of source power. As for their cultivation talent, Ling Han was more so filled with confidence. Before we leave, how are we going to deal with these people? Bewitching Maiden Ro asked. She was referring to Celestial Maiden Yunha and the other students from the 100 Battles Academy. Ling Han had continuously suppressed them, so they still had yet to wake up. I want to wipe their memories of Wally, Ling Han said. However, I'm afraid of overdoing it, and wiping too many memory. I'll do it, Wally said. During these past 100 or so years, he had silently sat beside them, not urging them or showing any impatience. He had been a picture of calm. However, this was understandable. He had remained here for dozens of epochs, so what harm was waiting for 100 years? You don't want payment? Ling Han asked with a smile. He knew that Wally was skilled with calculations, and he was also incredibly accurate with his analyses. However, he had a bad habit of only working for payment. No, Wally replied. He seemingly didn't notice the teasing nature of Ling Han's question. Chapter 2307 Attack. Ling Han laughed loudly and said, Why not? Wasn't this person always talking about fair exchange? Wally replied, This is related to my survival. In other words, he wouldn't ask for payment if the matters were related to him. These were categorized as doing things for himself. Then please go ahead, Ling Han said as he pointed at Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others. Wally nodded before stepping forward as requested. He extended a hand, and his fingers suddenly separated, becoming thinner and transforming into thousands of threads. These threads then landed on Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others' bodies, causing them to glow. The thin threads also glowed, and it was as if something were being drawn out from Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others' bodies. Ling Han looked carefully, and he could seemingly see numerous scenes coursing through the thin threads. These scenes were all related to Wally. This was truly mysterious. Wally had removed their memories of him just like that. After a while, Wally finished up and said, All done. He retrieved the thin threads, and his fingers returned to normal. Ling Han was extremely curious. Just how powerful was Wally? Let's go. After pondering for a moment, he ultimately decided to leave first. Otherwise, he was truly worried that the environment would affect them if they stayed for too long. They walked toward the soaring column of light. With a flash, they left the cavern. Ling Han observed his surroundings. Sure enough, we've been teleported away. This place is around 150 kilometers from the entrance. He shook his hand, waking Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others. After waking up, they immediately adopted a defensive stance. This was the basic instinct of all cultivators. Where is this? Why are we here? What in the world happened? They all exclaimed in astonishment. Ling Han chuckled and said, "We came across a powerful enemy, and all of you were knocked unconscious. After much difficulty and struggle, I finally managed to rescue all of you." Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others were all slightly skeptical. In their memories, they had been exploring the Holy Mountain, and they seemingly entered an underground river. Their memories then stopped here. They had come across an enemy. They had no recollection at all. Celestial Maiden Yunha looked at Wally and asked, "Who is he?" Right now, Wally was exuding the unique aura of a cultivator from the foreign realm. This aura was called spiritual power, and it was different from the auras of the celestial realm and the dark inverse realm. One heaven and earth could only contain one cultivation system. "Oh, he's just a passerby. He happened to pass by just now, and we coincidentally crossed paths, so I invited him over for a chat. We're from the same race after all," Ling Han replied with a chuckle. "Whom are you kidding?" Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others naturally didn't believe him. Ling Han didn't show any sense of belonging to his own race, and he would pummel and kill them on a whim. Moreover, the demon race encompassed so many people, so how could he suddenly feel so amicable toward a random one? Not to mention, it was possible for people to remain cold and aloof even toward those who were from the same clan. Ling Han paid no heed to whether they believed him. He had already made an excuse, so it was their choice whether they believed it or not. "Ah, that's right, the secret of the precious armor," Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others exclaimed. "You guys still want to go in?" Ling Han shrugged his shoulders and said, "I'm not going back to that godforsaken place." Indeed, he had already obtained the 2 ancestral king corpses, and Wally had also followed him out. What was the point of going back in? The others weren't aware of this, yet they could all recall the uncanny suppression of that place. Their lifespan was limited, and they could also experience hunger and starvation. Because of this, they had even been scammed of many celestial medicines by Ling Han. Just thinking about this made their hearts ache. They all stared at Ling Han in resentment. This man was truly full of tricks. As shameless as Ling Han was, he still couldn't help but blush slightly in embarrassment. "Why are you all staring at me? There's no flour on my face." He turned around and started to leave. He truly didn't want to be the subject of their strong gazes. Even though Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others didn't want to give up on the secrets of the precious armor, they understood that their power was limited. If they entered again, they very likely wouldn't be able to make it out alive. Thus, they were better off reporting this information to the Academy, which would most likely dispatch Ancestral King elites. In any case, reporting this piece of important information would already be a huge contribution. With this in mind, they felt much more at ease as they set off to return. Sometimes, trying to bite off more than one could chew would only result in death. Anyhow, they were extremely curious about how Ling Han had made it out. However, Ling Han always skirted the topic, making up excuses to avoid giving an answer. Several months passed, and they finally arrived back at the 100 Battles Academy. As their representative, Celestial Maiden Yunha immediately headed over to report this matter to the Academy. War soldiers had actually appeared in the foreign realm. This startled the higher-ups of the Academy. They called Ling Han and the others over, questioning them one by one. Everyone's account of the situation was similar, apart from the fact that Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others were all missing the part of the memory from when they had entered the underground river to when they had exited the cavern. Meanwhile, Ling Han claimed that he had fled with Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others, and they had eventually discovered a transfer formation-like mechanism at the end of the underground river. They had then used this to escape. This was an easily believable excuse. After all, there were war soldiers in that area, with several of them being extraordinarily powerful. As such, it wasn't strange that Ling Han and the others were forced to flee. The Academy naturally formed a resolution about this. However, Ling Han and the others didn't have the authority to know. In any case, if there were any huge discoveries, they would naturally be rewarded. Anyhow, after discovering that they had lost over 100 years' worth of memories, Celestial Maiden Yunha and the others couldn't help but feel suspicious. Just how severely wounded had they been? They had actually remained unconscious for that long. However, Ling Han was adamant that this was the case, and they couldn't prove otherwise. After all, Ling Han's powerful nature was still clear in their memories. Wally also entered the academy. He kept a very low profile, and he only exhibited the talent of a king tier. His cultivation level was also set at the 6th lotus. Ling Han naturally didn't believe this. Right now, he was cultivating and deciding to advance to the Immortal Palace tier after a few days. However, a significant commotion suddenly swept through the demon quarters. He walked out, only to see the shock waves of battle in the distance. Regulations of light? Ling Han squinted his eyes. It was common for demons to battle against each other since the demon race was a naturally combative race. As long as these battles didn't result in disability or death, the Academy wouldn't stop them, either. Now, however, it was members of the angel race that were attacking. This was a rare sight. With the might of the heavenly venerates from both sides suppressing them, there was seldom any conflict between the two races, even though they weren't on friendly terms. Conflicts in the Academy were even rarer. Ling Han walked over, planning to observe the situation. 3 angels had entered the demon quarters. They were grossly outnumbered. However, they weren't weak at all, and they were relaxed as they continued to advance. The demons were completely unable to stop them. "Brother, what's going on?" Ling Han asked the demon beside him. "These bastards are here to capture someone," the demon replied. "Capture whom?" Ling Han asked. "Someone called Ba," the demon replied without turning around to look at him. "Even though I don't know how Ba offended them, it's preposterous for angels to charge into the demon quarters, even if they're Wu Ya and Sun Feng." Ling Han was astonished. The culprit was actually himself. Wu Ya and Sun Feng? They were both at the 8th lotus. Moreover, disregarding Yu Yuan, they were the most powerful members of the angel quarters. "Yu Yuan didn't come?" he asked. "Yu Yuan." The demon shuddered upon hearing this. This was a name that instilled respect and reverence into everyone's mind. It was because of him that the 100 Battles Academy had managed to place 72nd out of the 1,000 academies. Even the demon race couldn't help but feel respect and reverence toward this person. Chapter 2308 Accidental Injury. "You're thinking far too highly of this Ba," the demon said with disdain. "How can he possibly offend Yu Yuan? They're not even on the same level." Just then, he had still been filled with righteous rage about the angels coming to attack the demons. Now, however, he was siding with Yu Yuan instead. Judging from this, it was extremely clear just how lofty a standing Yu Yuan enjoyed in the minds of these students. His reputation had already transcended the boundaries of race. He was a synonym for strength and power. Ling Han involuntarily smiled, and said, "Perhaps this Ba is also incredibly powerful. Perhaps he can even pummel Yu Yuan?" Rubbish! Not only did the demon beside him glare at him in anger, but even the dozen or so demons in the surroundings turned around to glare at him. They all wore expressions of disdain and disgust. Yu Yuan was like a god of the 100 Battles Academy. His name couldn't be sullied. "Why is this rubbish? After all, they haven't fought before," Ling Han said with a smile. His words naturally attracted even more rage. Many more demons turned around to glare at him, and it was as if they wanted to use their gazes to cut him into 10,000 pieces. "Ha!" Someone suddenly faltered before pointing at Ling Han, and exclaiming, "He's Ba!" "Ah!" Everyone cried out in astonishment. Holy fuck! After speaking nonsense for so long, this was the culprit? Moreover, just how shameless was he? He was actually praising himself. Ling Han grinned and said, "Those who think that I can pummel Yu Yuan, please raise your hand." As expected, no one raised their hand. They all looked at him as if he were a retard. "Bah! One of the angels roared. He immediately charged over. Pang pang pang. No one could block him, and his rippling holy glow made him appear like a spotless deity. My obedient son, Ling Han said with a nod. Oh, that's right. What were you called again, son? Papa forgot your name. The angel instantly flushed red with rage. This person was doing this on purpose, right? He had called himself Ba to take advantage of others. He humphed and said, I'm Lu Yuanxin. Fortunately, it's your heart that's green, not your head, Ling Han said with a serious expression. Lu Yuanxin had already been enraged, and this infuriated him even more. He was incandescent with rage as he lunged at Ling Han. Not a single demon stepped forward to help Ling Han. After all, he had dared to belittle Yu Yuan just then, so this caused all of them to detest him. Ling Han glanced up, and he immediately unleashed a terrifying killing intent. Lu Yuanxin was forcefully stopped in his tracks. Fear flashed across his face. He had a feeling that if he didn't stop, he would be ruthlessly killed by Ling Han. How was this possible? He was at the first leaf of the 8th lotus. According to his information, Ling Han was only at the 5th leaf of the 6th lotus. The gulf between them was like the gulf between heaven and earth. Even if he shut his eyes and allowed Ling Han to attack him at will, Ling Han still shouldn't be able to breach his defenses. Just where in the world was this feeling coming from? Ling Han smiled again and said, My good son, do you know that attacking Papa is extremely undutiful? Why don't you hurry up and kneel down and apologize? Lu Yuanxin forcefully suppressed the fear in his mind. He was convinced that Ling Han had cultivated some kind of special technique that targeted one's divine sense. It was because of this that he had mistakenly felt that Ling Han was powerful. In reality, he wasn't actually powerful. In any case, Ling Han had called him son time and time again, so he would definitely be laughed at by others if he didn't give Ling Han a wicked beating. You're seeking death, he roared as he unleashed an attack. Boom! A terrifying wave of energy swept forward. His wings flapped, and he immediately summoned 12 golden swords that stabbed down at Ling Han. Each sword was brimming with a devastating destructive power. A son is attacking his father. Absolutely traitorous. Ling Han shouted. He activated the void space, but he didn't summon tens of thousands of clones. Instead, he simply used his agility to dodge the attack. Boom! One of the golden swords had initially been stabbing at Ling Han, yet his disappearance was so sudden that Lu Yuanxin couldn't stop the attack in time. The golden sword instantly impaled the leg of the person behind Ling Han. The person immediately wailed in agony. At the same time, he glared at Lu Yuanxin in anger. Whom had he offended? Why had he suffered such misfortune? Lu Yuanxin grimaced upon seeing this. Charging into the demon quarters to cause a commotion was already against the academy rules. Now, he had even wounded someone for no reason. He was definitely going to face punishment. However, since it had already come to this, he naturally couldn't back down. He needed to severely punish Ling Han. He commanded the remaining 11 golden swords to continue pursuing Ling Han. Ling Han used the same tactic, activating the void space to vanish when the golden swords neared him. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. Golden light flashed through the air, terrifying the surrounding demons. If they were stabbed, wouldn't that be the pinnacle of misfortune? Fortunately, Lu Yuanxin was prepared now, so he carefully controlled his swords to avoid the onlookers. He waved his hand with a humph, commanding the 11 golden swords to continue their pursuit of Ling Han. He's not getting tricked? Ling Han chuckled in his mind. You think it's this easy? When the swords shot over, he lightly parried one of them with his fingers while activating his void space to dodge. The sword instantly changed its trajectory, shooting toward a demon. Pooh! No one expected this sword to suddenly change trajectory, and the demon that it shot toward wasn't very powerful, either. He was instantly struck. Coincidentally, this was the same demon that had been struck before. Ah! He screamed in agony, and tears were about to fall from his eyes. This was not only from pain but also from grief. They all said that sabers and swords had no eyes. However, to be struck twice? These swords clearly had eyes. They were as bloody accurate as could be. He stared at Lu Yuanxin in grief and resentment. Did the other party harbor some great hatred against him or something? Lu Yuanxin also felt unspeakable vexation. He had clearly targeted Ling Han, so it was definitely Ling Han's slight parry that had caused this. It was because of this that his sword had changed paths, and accidentally wounded someone. Fortunately, this also signified that Ling Han wasn't very powerful. Otherwise, he wouldn't have needed to dodge, and he could have parried more than one sword. He drew on his remaining power, and commanded the remaining 10 swords to continue pursuing Ling Han. "You people! You're far too short-sighted," Ling Han said with a chuckle as he dodged Lu Yuanxin's attacks. "You're convinced that Yu Yuan can't be rivaled? How laughable! If he's truly invincible, how did he only win 72nd place for the academy?" "Impudence!" Lu Yuanxin roared in wild rage. This person actually dared to slander Yu Yuan? He was seeking death. With a roar, his 10 golden swords instantly sped up. He had activated an ultimate technique and unleashed his pinnacle power. However, the price was his spiritual power being consumed 10 times quicker. This time, Ling Han didn't rely on the void space to dodge these attacks. Instead, he suddenly leaped back and dodged the attacks of all 10 swords. His sudden change in tactic was done such that Lu Yuanxin couldn't stop his attack in time. The 10 golden swords immediately shot toward the demon behind Ling Han. Ling Han was definitely doing this on purpose. The demon behind him was none other than the demon who had already been stabbed twice. His body was now filled with swords. Even though these swords had been formed from regulations, they would remain material for a short time. Moreover, they wouldn't dissipate until the power of regulations within them was exhausted. The demon glanced at Lu Yuanxin, and then he glanced at Ling Han. The words "holy fuck" were uttered from his mouth before he cocked his head and collapsed to the ground, unconscious. His gaze had been filled with grief and resentment. Why did Lu Yuanxin always target him? And why did Ling Han always stand in front of him, causing him to suffer such misfortune? Detestable! Lu Yuanxin was beside himself with rage. He furiously charged Ling Han. He was truly about to become a laughingstock. All 12 of his attacks had landed on an innocent bystander. Ling Han smiled faintly. He extended his right hand, using a single finger like a sword. With a slight flick, a burst of devastating sword chi slashed across the air. Its might was astonishing. In Chinese, the word for father can be read as Ba. In Chinese, Lu is the character for green, and Xian is for heart. Also, wearing a green hat means getting cucked. Chapter 2309 Tables Turned. Ling Han used the heaven-destroying 9 swords, switching to the regulation of slaughter of the foreign realm to activate it. Sword chi danced wildly, power of regulation spreading out. This area instantly became extremely dangerous. Everyone in the surroundings stepped back to avoid being dragged into this disaster. It should be known that that person from before was a perfect example to learn from. Fuck! Everyone looked towards that unlucky fool. Because he had passed out, it was naturally impossible for him to leave, and now that he was dragged into the battle, the robes he was wearing were also torn into scraps, even exposing a flushed bottom. His tail was visibly drooping, and just happened to be lying between his legs, concealing the last bit of that inappropriate scene. Everyone exchanged looks, and thought that this guy was really ruined. Having mistakenly been struck by 12 sword strikes was already a huge joke, and now was forced to suffer the public exposure of his bottom. What face would he have left to continue staying here? Yet Lu Yuanxin's eyes were already bloodshot. He cared about nothing else now, and merely used ultimate moves to launch a flurry of relentless attacks on Ling Han. He summoned a sword of light. Its might was extremely terrifying, and the strike of light it delivered incited great dislike from the demon race. The power of light was contained within, which caused them to feel an instinctive dislike. Yet Ling Han was still unafraid. Recently, he had been recultivating the indestructible Heaven Scroll while making use of the power of the Origin Magic Cube. He had gained a deeper understanding of regulations, and even the power of heaven and earth that was superior to regulations, improving his physique further. But now that he had reached this stage, improving physique could no longer completely depend on comprehension. It was too slow. Instead, he would have to consume various kinds of natural treasures, and even fuse divine metal into his body, turning himself into a human weapon. Ling Han was still a great distance away from fusing divine metal into himself, but the resources he needed were still astonishing in amount. The academy had supplied some, but it was far from reaching the amount that he needed. However, his present physique was more than adequate to deal with Lu Yuanxin. The two of them battled incredibly fiercely. The spectators of the demon race were more and more surprised. Though Ling Han had not gained an absolute upper hand, wasn't it said that he was only a 6th Lotus 5th Leaf cultivator? How could he be as powerful as this? Ling Han unleashed his battle prowess fully, and a 7th Lotus 9th Lotus appeared on his forehead. Hi's cultivation level was clear to see. This was a monarch star. Everyone felt their scalps go numb. It should be known that even in a dimension like the foreign realm, the number of monarch stars was still extremely rare. For example, the 100 Battles Academy only possessed one, and that was Yu Yuan. Why did Yu Yuan have such a high status? A part of the reason was because of the glory he had won for the academy, and another was his identity as a monarch star inspiring reverence from others. He was an existence that was destined to become an 18th Lotus Ancestral King, as long as he did not die before that. Who would not look up to him? No wonder this man had been so filled with confidence, considering even Yu Yuan below his notice. As a monarch star, he did indeed should have this kind of dominance. When this fact was uncovered, the attitude of a great many members of the demon race did an about turn, switching from their previous disdain to heated fanaticism. They, too, had a monarch star now. Though they revered Yu Yuan, that was speaking in terms of the bigger picture. After all, they all belonged to the same academy, but if possible, how could it be that they did not hope that Yu Yuan was a member of the demon race? Of course, there was no way that Yu Yuan would become a member of the demon race, but now Ba had appeared, so they were naturally cheering and encouraging him. Who said that the demon race did not have any super geniuses? Humph. Wu Ya and Sun Feng both walked over. One of them was an 8th Lotus 7th Leaf, while the other was an 8th Lotus 8th Leaf. Their strength could be ranked in the top 10 of the academy. There were no 3 people in the demon quarters that could stop them. At most there were only 2. The problem was that neither of the strongest 2 of the demon quarters were here. One had ventured out on a training trip, while the other was breaking through his cultivation level somewhere. For this moment, where were they supposed to go and find them? Bah, you are too arrogant, Wu Ye stated evenly, yet his tone bore a frightening pressure, as if he was an emperor that was presently rebuking his subject. If a ruler demanded the death of his subject, the subject would have no choice but to die. That was how mighty and powerful he was. Ling Han smiled faintly and said, "There is no father like that, nor can I manage to have a son as arrogant as you." Instantly, many members of the demon race spluttered in laughter. This guy had definitely named himself Ba on purpose. Whoever called his name would be at a disadvantage, and Ling Han would constantly be taking advantage of them. Wu Ya's expression was very dark. He humphed and said, "Spare the cheekiness. So what if you are a monarch star? In front of me, you will not even last a single blow." He paused and then continued, "I have come today to issue you a warning. Stay away from Xing and the others. They are not someone that an ugly and coarse guy like you can covet." Hearing his words, everyone finally found that they had sought Ling Han out because of women. Sigh, as expected, even the mightiest heroes could not escape from the test of beauties. Ling Han shook his head. "That is not up to you to say." "Then you are asking for your own suffering." Wu Ya moved, and grabbed out at Ling Han. "Wu Ya, you have gone too far." An elite of the demon quarters declared in displeasure. He stretched out a colossal giant hand, blocking this attempted strike from Wu Ya. However, it was clear that his strength was inferior. Though he had blocked this strike, his body was uncontrollably trembling, with him stepping back continuously. He retreated at least 300 meters before finally stopping, and 2 lines of footprints were clearly left behind on the ground. "Mutal, you dare stop me?" Wu Ye demanded coldly, his eyes dark. "You run over to our demon quarters, and dare to commit a crime. Do you think that there is no one in our demon race?" That elite of the demon race, Mutal, retorted. Wu Ya and the others had barged in. If they were still allowed to just boldly strut out of here, what would be left of the pride of the demon race? Of course, if Ling Han was not a monarch star, he would not be protecting him with such great efforts either. Both Wu Ya and Sun Feng were well-known elites of the angel quarters. If he wanted to prevent them from committing violence, he would have to pay an exorbitant price. So what if you guys all attack together? Would you be any match for Sun Feng and me? Wu Ye demanded calmly. Mutal was speechless. The other's words rang true. The gap in strength between them was too wide. Seventh lotuses were completely outmatched in front of Wu Ye and Sun Feng, and only eighth lotus could be a match. But how many eighth lotuses were there? Any eighth lotus that could stay in the academy was a monarch tier, and there were at most 10 in a single academy. If they were divided equally over all the quarters, that would be 2 to 3 each. The demon quarters had 3. The 2 strongest had left the academy temporarily, and at present, the strongest one was him. If it was only Wu Ye or Sun Feng alone, he was confident that he could manage to stop them. After all, this was the academy. No matter how arrogant Wu Ye was, he would not dare to act rashly. However, if there were the 2 of them, he did not think he could stop them. He humphed. Do you think our demon race all have no backbone? Furthermore, where do you think this is, that you would be allowed to act so willfully and arrogantly? Wu Ye laughed loudly. If I told you that this brat actually dared to conspire against Yu Yuan's woman, would you still dare to protect him? What? Everyone was stunned. This Ba was really too outrageously bold, wasn't he? He actually dared covet Yu Yuan's woman? Moreover, your taste was too hardcore, wasn't it? You could actually make a move on a woman of the angel race. Ling Han was rendered speechless. This was really a complete distortion of the truth. It was clearly Yu Yuan that dared to have improper designs on his woman, yet they were accusing him of it. Anyone who dares to interfere further would be making an enemy of Yu Yuan. Wu Ye sneered, and grabbed out aggressively at Ling Han. Chapter 23:10 Detained. Wu Ye moved, while Sun Feng simply stood, hands crossed behind his back. He exuded a terrifying aura that suppressed all of them, especially Mutal. Meanwhile, Lu Yuanxin looked intently at Ling Han, fear rising in his heart. Ling Han was actually a monarch star. What kind of concept was this? Not only did monarch stars have battle prowess that far surpassed monarch tiers that were their equal in cultivation level, they were faster at cultivation as well. This meant that Ling Han would be able to catch up with him in cultivation level very soon, and then easily suppress him. Moreover, as long as Ling Han did not die before that, he would be able to reach as far as 18th Lotus Ancestral King in future. Just what kind of noble, majestic existence was that? He very much hoped that Wu Ye would kill Ling Han, and forever get rid of this future problem. Ling Han humphed coldly, and summoned the divine demon's sword. Immediately, a cold light surged into the heavens, strong and severe. Instantly, Wu Ye withdrew and retreated, not daring to face the sharpness of the divine sword head-on. What kind of precious tool is this? How could it be so powerful? He paled in shock. Without even touching it, just feeling the sword light surging from it caused him to shiver all over. This kind of instinct was accurate. Otherwise, without even being directly struck by the divine demon sword, just the slightest touch by sword chi, and he would be losing a few limbs. Sun Feng's expression also changed. Ling Han's battle prowess looked only to be at the 8th Lotus second leaf, or third leaf, far from being a match for them. Even a monarch star could not possibly defy the heavens. But it was a different story with this sword added into the equation. The aura was too shocking, possessing might to overturn the heavens and earth. Ling Han stood with his sword, alone and proud. If you want a battle, I will oblige. Ling Han stated evenly, his eyes set on Wu Ye, a frightening killing intent emanating from his gaze. Everyone felt their hearts grow numb, feeling the blood boiling in their veins and a strong urge to roar loudly. Wu Ye remained silent for a while, and then said, even with a god tool, so what? The gap between us is not something that a mere god tool could make up for at all. If you want to lose any limbs, just come on. Ling Han crooked a finger at him. Wu Ye sent out another palm strike, pressing down on Ling Han. He had spoken very calmly and easily, but the truth was he was extremely wary of the divine demon's sword, and did not even dare to close the distance for a battle at close quarters. Instead, with his higher cultivation level, he used spiritual power to condense into regulations, which turned into a colossal palm that descended on Ling Han. Ling Han brandished his sword in a slash. Shwa, This giant hand was split in two, and both halves passed on either side of him, unable to cause even the slightest sliver of damage to him. Fuck! Wu Ye frowned deeply. His full-powered blow had actually been so easily resolved by Ling Han. Then, their goal of capturing Ling Han and teaching this brat a good lesson today would be very hard to accomplish. Who would have thought that Ling Han would actually have such a terrifying god tool? Looks like Yu Yuan will have to act personally. Sun Feng glanced at Wu Ye, and the two of them communicated this message through divine sense. Yu Yuan, the strongest elite of the 100 Battles Academy. Long ago, 1,000,000 years ago, when the 1,000 academies had battled fiercely, he had already been an 8th Lotus 4th Leaf. Now that 1,000,000 years had passed, no one knew the exact details of his cultivation level. They only knew that he was increasingly fearful, and even the likes of Sun Feng would not survive a single attack from him. If he moved, then even if Ling Han possessed a god tool, it would be useless. The latter would be easily suppressed. Let's go, Wu Ye declared. Lu Yuanxin was taken aback. They were going to leave just like that. They had come so aggressively, wanting to teach Ling Han a lesson, but they had just seen him, and they were going to call a halt? What were they playing around with here? It was all talk, no action. Wouldn't this just become a joke to others? But what could he do? Even Wu Ye and Sun Feng had given up. The three of them turned around, planning to leave. Wait. Mutal spoke up. What place do you guys think this is? Somewhere that you can come and go just as you like? Then do you still want to invite us to dinner? Sun Feng smirked. Ling Han held a divine sword, so they could not suppress him, but if they wanted to leave, how could it be that Ling Han would be able to detain them? Mutal's expression was dark. The two greatest elites of their quarters were not here, so it could be said that he was the representative of the demon quarters. Yet now such a matter had happened, and it was naturally him that would be feeling the most humiliated. He knew that he alone could not possibly stop Sun Feng and Wu Ye. It was not doable even with Ling Han added, but the fact that he could not accept even more was these three people would just strut boldly into the demon quarters for a roam, and then leave completely unscathed. He has to stay, Mutal said, pointing at Lu Yuanxin. No matter what, he could not allow the three of them to withdraw completely unscathed. He had to detain at least one of them as an outlet for their fury. In your dreams, Lu Yuanxin sneered. He was also an elite that ranked in the top 10 of the academy. They wanted to detain him? Hehe. Is that right? Ling Han moved while wielding his sword. In a flash, his figure had already appeared in front of Lu Yuanxin. His right hand balled into a fist, and he shot a punch at Lu Yuanxin. How dare you? Wu Ye moved as well, pressing out with his right hand. It turned into a massive mountain, wanting to stop Ling Han. Ling Han had long since been waiting for him. With a wave of his right hand, the divine demon sword swept out in a strike. Shua, that massive mountain formed of regulations, was immediately slashed in two. In mere terms of destructive power, what could compare to the divine demon sword? Sun Feng, too, roared in fury, and drew a bow. Though it was very old and damaged, it exuded a chilling aura. Xiao, he drew the bow and shot out an arrow, but Mutal moved decisively, focusing his full power into a shield that blocked this arrow. It was not able to affect Ling Han. You have gone too far. Lu Yuanxin roared in fury. You faced Wu Ye on one side, and at the same time planned to take me down as well? Just how much are you looking down on me? It was not that he had not exchanged blows with Ling Han before. The battle prowess of both sides was almost on par. He countered strongly, wanting to make Ling Han know just how powerful he could be. Ling Han used Fists of Fury, and launched a barrage of attacks at Lu Yuanxin. What was Fists of Fury? Naturally, it was referring to strikes of fury, something related to emotion. If Ling Han was under normal circumstances, he would only be able to release about 70 to 80% of the true might of Fists of Fury, but now someone had an eye on his woman, and had come right to his doorstep to issue threats, so how could he not feel angry? Boom! Using Fists of Fury, it was as if Ling Han had turned into a great demon from the primitive age. Every punch carried supreme dominance. He was also like a crazed demon, and others would feel their hearts shudder and their legs go unsteady just at the sight of him. Lu Yuanxin was instantly suppressed. This time, Ling Han used his true strength. Multiple regulations surged out with astonishing might. Both Wu Ya and Sun Feng roared in fury, and wanted to rush forwards to save him. However, one of them was being detained by Mutal, while the other was intimidated by the powerful weapon in Ling Han's hands, and did not dare to come closer at all. He could only watch helplessly as Lu Yuanxin was beaten down harder and harder. In merely a few hundred moves, Lu Yuanxin was subdued, and Ling Han held him up like he was holding a chick. Everyone was stunned. Though everyone knew that a monarch star was stronger than a monarch tier, there was still a major tier between the two of them after all. No matter what, the two of them should have had an equal share of the limelight. How could they have known that Ling Han's evolution index had reached 10.9, whereas ordinary monarch stars were at 10? This meant that he was close to leaping out of the threshold of monarch stars. How could he not be strong? Both Wu Ya and Sun Feng stopped. Now that Lu Yuanxin had fallen into Ling Han's hands, there was no meaning for them to continue fighting. They both had ugly expressions. Though they themselves were completely fine, the three of them had entered the demon quarters together, and only two of them left in the end. If this spread out, it would naturally be a great humiliation. And all this was because of Ling Han. As expected of a monarch star, he was really too terrifying. If he was to break through to 8th Lotus, he would definitely be qualified to become a threat to Yu Yuan. Let's go. Neither Wu Ya nor Sun Feng stayed and continued to fight zealously. Now that things had reached this point, they might as well leave resolutely and decisively to prevent further humiliation. Chapter 23:11 Great Misfortune. The moment Wu Ya and Sun Feng left, the demon quarters exploded with thunderous cheers. They had actually chased off two of the elites ranked in the top 10 of the academy. Furthermore, they had been forced to leave behind one of their companions. This combat achievement was extremely shocking. Everyone's eyes were focused on Ling Han. It was he, armed with a single sword, that had won back the pride of the demon quarters, and had raised their reputation to a new height at that. Bah! 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 Everyone shouted hoarsely, as if they wanted to shout out their hearts, and only then could they express the excitement that was presently in their hearts. As for Mutal, they had ignored him completely. What they needed now was a hero. Ling Han smirked faintly, and tossed Lu Yuanxin over. Pa, this guy instantly fell onto the ground. Come, if you have a grudge with him, get your revenge. Ling Han was very devious. He grabbed the member of the demon race that had consecutively been struck with 12 swords and forced to expose his bottom in the aftermath. This guy had long since passed out cold. Ling Han stretched out a hand and pressed down. Regulations of wood surged out, and the 12 golden swords that were still stabbed into his body immediately disappeared. Furthermore, his injuries were also recovering at a visible rate. He slowly regained consciousness. When he saw his fellow companions around him, his heart calmed. However, he immediately felt coolness on a specific spot on his body. Instantly, his expression changed drastically. He secretly stretched out his hand and touched it. When his hand came into contact with bare skin, his face was immediately ashen. Oh no, he had actually exposed his bottom in full public. Now, he really had no face to show himself. Ling Han laughed, patted his shoulder and said, I'll tell you some good news. Your A*S is still completely untouched and fine. That demon's expression was resentful. If it were not Ling Han that had repeatedly used him as a scapegoat, why would he have been struck so many times and passed out in his pain? If he had not passed out, how could he have possibly exposed his bottom? The others laughed raucously. In the first place, there was countless internal strife among the demon race, so they would naturally be unconcerned about this person's pride. They revered elites, and Ling Han was the hero in their hearts. Come, we won't leave any overnight grudges. Ling Han helped him up, and then pointed at Lu Yuanxin, who was lying on the ground. Ling Han had long since knocked him out. The demon instantly seethed in fury. He was definitely no idiot. When he saw that only one of the angel race, Lu Yuanxin, was left here, he could more or less guess what had happened. Hence, if he was to vent his fury and resentment on Lu Yuanxin, he would never dare to actually do so. But how could he not avenge this grudge? He had been forced to expose his bottom in public. Moreover, if he could stomp a few times on one of the top 10 elites of the academy, Lu Yuanxin, what kind of great honor would that be? It was enough to make up for the humiliation he had suffered by exposing his bottom. In any case, the angel and demon race had never been on good terms. Even if he really caused any great trouble, wouldn't there still be someone stronger than him to hold down the fort? His malicious intent stoked his courage. Immediately, he raised his foot and stomped on Lu Yuanxin's face. Ling Han smiled inwardly. With a thought, the power of regulation that had locked Lu Yuanxin instantly subsided like seawater. Lu Yuanxin immediately came back to his senses. At first, he was still dazed, but when he opened his eyes, he then saw a massive bull's hoof stomping down on his face. Instinctively, he shouted lightly as he shot up in a leap while sending out a harsh attack. Pang! That unfortunate demon was instantly sent flying. If it were not Ling Han stretching out his hand to block some of the impact, he would probably have been killed. It was not because Ling Han had suddenly become kind, but rather that the matter would become serious if someone died, and if the Academy pursued the matter, it would be hard for him to come out clean as well. Fuck! That demon released a roar of indignant fury, looking plaintively at Lu Yuanxin. Then, he very decisively closed his eyes, and he had once again passed out. Everyone was speechless. To be unfortunate to this extent, this guy was probably setting a record. Meanwhile, Ling Han pretended to be furious. You actually dare to cause further injury, brothers. Beat him up. Beat him up. All the members of the demon race were also furious. They all rushed forwards, pouring out punches and kicks all on Lu Yuanxin. Though Ling Han had dispelled the control over Lu Yuanxin, he had still left behind a power of suppression, so that the other could only release a 10,000th of his original battle prowess, and this had dragged his battle prowess to the level of 7th Lotus. Just how many 7th Lotus demons were there here? Furthermore, there was no lack of monarch tiers and emperor tiers among them. With every single person sending out a strike, even if Lu Yuanxin was a monarch tier, so what? He was still beaten to the point of wailing in pain. The more he called out, the more excited the masses became. 1. Because Yu Yuan had emerged from the angel quarters, this also led to the angel quarters taking the lion's share of resources among the 4 quarters. Usually, no matter how arrogant the members of the angel quarters were, so what? Who would dare make enemies of them? Just like how Sun Feng and his group had actually barged into the demon quarters this time. If it were not for Ling Han showing his might, they would still have been able to retreat completely unscathed. This was the intimidation of Yu Yuan. And now with Ling Han leading them, it had completely drummed up the military morale of the demon race. Perhaps everyone had suppressed their fury for too long, which resulted in this great explosion, and Lu Yuanxin had thus become their punching bag. Pang pang pang. All of them were extremely violent, almost beating Lu Yuanxin to death. In just a short while, Lu Yuanxin had been beaten to practically his last breath. If it were not for Mutal holding them back firmly, he could have even been beaten to death. Ling Han chuckled and quietly left, hiding his name and credit. However, this matter had also caused a great commotion. Who would have thought that the demon quarters would actually explode, and dare to capture a resident of the angel quarters and beat him up? Furthermore, there was actually an extremely furious member of the demon quarters that had a *S raped Lu Yuanxin with a metal rod. It was unknown whether this was fact or fiction, but after Lu Yuanxin was sent back, he kept holding his behind every time he walked for the next few days. So many people believed that this was true. And the man that had caused the demon quarters to explode was a miracle. When he first entered the academy, he was only a 6th Lotus 5th Leaf. There was a clear assessment record for this, and in just over 100 years, he had reached the height of 7th Lotus 9th Leaf. This was too shocking. This man's name was Ba. A very flashy name, which was also a mockery of the masses at the same time. Who knew how many people had fallen for it, and had gained another father suddenly out of nowhere. Meanwhile, Lu Yuanxin had become a laughingstock. As one of the 10 greatest elites of the academy, he had actually been beaten black and blue, and even been *S raped. In the future, he would definitely be unable to face others. However, was the angel quarters so easily trifled with? They did not just have Yu Yuan. As expected, just 2 days later, the angel quarters had announced that Ling Han was to immediately kneel with every step of the journey to the angel quarters to make a personal apology. Otherwise, Yu Yuan would move personally, grab Ling Han out of the demon quarters, and publicly punish him. Ling Han did not know this at all. He called Wally over and asked this guy to help him analyze and calculate to find every little problem in his Tao foundation, and then he was to make corrections. After this was done, he went to break through to the Immortal Palace tier. Why was Wally suddenly willing to help? Of course, it was not because he had suddenly grown a conscience, but rather because Ling Han had issued him a debt note in exchange for this. And why would Wally agree? Ling Han said that he would give Wally divine metal as pay, but it was not now. Instead, it would be owed first because he only had some divine metal in his possession. Moreover, Wally was still earnestly refining that scroll that could not be opened. In any case, he couldn't do anything else in the next 200 million years, either, so what was wrong with just owing him for now? In short, Ling Han spoke very glibly, convincing Wally into agreeing to help first, and then ask for payment later. Chapter 23:12 Origin. Wally might not be a martial arts elite, but in terms of mathematical skill, there was probably no one that could compare to him. According to Wally, any regulations could be enacted, expressed, and understood through various matrices. He also mentioned things like formulas, mathematical equations, and others, and had written who knew how many pages. Ling Han was completely mystified. Speak in a way I can understand. Ling Han really could not take it anymore. Your knowledge of regulations and the essence of the high-level dimension is too backwards. Wally shook his head. High-level dimensions have already developed a systematic understanding of the essence of origin realms, and the formula I demonstrated to you is the key to unlocking this essence. The reason why I was designed and created was to explore the essence of the origin realm. Hence, after I was created, my realm has paid an innumerable price to send me to a high-level dimension and absorb the knowledge there. Wally revealed an astonishing truth. Ling Han was stunned. You guys actually have the ability to send people of your realm to a higher-level dimension? It should be known that if Ling Han had not obtained the origin magic cube, there would have been absolutely no way that he could enter into the foreign realm. That was because he could not have cultivated the regulations of the foreign realm without it. The moment he had entered that way, he would have been targeted by the heaven and earth, and once the regulations locked in his body had been completely exhausted, his strength would only have been limited to the Genesis tier. That would have only spelled death for him. The Dark Inverse Realm was also a low-level dimension, yet they actually had the ability to send someone into a high-level dimension. How could this not be shocking? Only me. Wally pointed at himself. I am an artificial intelligence model. Though I have retained my battle module, it is not my primary function. I have not cultivated your so-called regulations. Theoretically speaking, I am no different than a piece of metal or wood. Hence, even if I entered into a high-level dimension, I would not be detected. He couldn't have imagined that this guy also had the potential to be a spy. After I learned enough knowledge in the high-level dimension, I returned to my realm as instructed. Through a long period of calculation and deduction, I absorbed all the theoretical knowledge of the high-level dimension, and next was entering into the practical experimentation stage. The power of heaven and earth is superior to regulations. In high-level dimensions, elites would be directly extracting the power of heaven and earth, but ordinary people cannot do so, and it needs to be mined. Furthermore, the power of heaven and earth is located in the core of the realm, so it is extremely difficult to mine. Moreover, if it was done rashly without mature experience and technique, it would bring great disaster to my realm. Hence, a powerful king and I arrived here, preparing to execute a top-secret mission. When he spoke of this, he couldn't help but stop abruptly. That was because damage had appeared in this part of his memory, and he could not continue further. Wally's manner was incredibly meticulous. He had to calculate and deduce, and only after it had exceeded a certain percentage would he think that an action was viable or close to the truth. And the ability of making associative connections was pitifully poor for him. Perhaps it was just like he had said. It had not been very long since he had developed self-consciousness. After a few more epochs, he might be able to make an associative connection, but all this would still have to be based on ironclad facts. Ling Han very easily thought of it. What Wally and that king wanted to do was to enter into the realm core of the foreign realm and extract the power of heaven and earth there. If they had succeeded, they could have returned to the Dark Inverse Realm and continued. In that case, the Dark Inverse Realm might have been able to successfully leap to possess the battle prowess of a medium-level dimension. Worst come to worst, they would still have been able to become one of the strongest low-level dimensions. If they had failed, the damage caused would only have been done to the foreign realm, and would not have affected the dark inverse realm. This was Ling Han's deduction, and was practically based completely on assumptions as well. Furthermore, he thought that he was practically 100% correct. However, there was absolutely no way that Wally would agree with him. Can you extract the power of heaven and earth? Ling Han thought of this, and couldn't help but inhale sharply. Right. Wally had mentioned some void particle energy, and said it was one of the source powers of an origin realm. If he had not gone to a high-level dimension, how could he have had this kind of knowledge? Wally nodded. Yes, this is a very complicated process of energy conversion, he explained endlessly. This would not endanger his existence, and Ling Han was owing him payment, so he held nothing back. With a thought, Ling Han took out the origin magic cube, and asked, "Do you know what this is?" Wally's eyes lit up, and his figure began to flicker. Ling Han knew that this was an expression of excitement from him. This is the core born when the heaven and earth first developed, and contains the power of origin, he said. What is origin? Ling Han asked. When the heaven and earth first began, various source powers would develop extremely intensely, and become more and more complex, so you would not be able to easily penetrate directly into the essence, Wally explained. Just like a grain of rice hiding in a granary, you would not be able to find it at all. If the layers of energy wrapped around it could be decoded, our formula would become simpler, and the model would become more well-developed. We would be able to better grasp the power of heaven and earth. No, according to my calculations, this would be qualitative progress. But when a realm comes into being, there will be strong power protecting it, and there is no way to obtain its core at all. Wally's eyes were glowing, and the light in his eyes was not dimming at all. Give this core to me, and there is a chance that I can decipher the secret of the essence of heaven and earth. Ling Han only thought that the dark inverse realm was really awesome, that they could actually create such a terrifying thing. Hold on. At least 35 epochs had passed since Wally was born. How could it be that the dark inverse realm could not create a second Wally? They can't. Wally's sensitivity to the slight changes in expression and flicker in emotion of others was practically on the level of a monster. He immediately sensed what Ling Han was thinking. In the first place, I was created through all efforts and resources of our realm. Going by my deduction, our realm would need at least 300 epochs to be able to produce enough materials to create a second me. He thought for a while. Of course, this would not be the same mayhem unique. Ling Han wanted to laugh. At times, this guy was frighteningly meticulous in thinking, but at others, he would be like a child. It was indeed as Wally had said. It had not been long since he had developed self-consciousness, and was presently still in the process of maturing. Ling Han shook his head and said, I can't give this to you for now. I need it too. Wally's eyes shone brightly, and stared at the origin magic cube for a long time. Then he said, this is the core of a false realm. The power of origin contained within is very, very limited. Furthermore, this power is presently dissipating and evolving, becoming more complicated. It will become more and more similar with the matured power of heaven and earth. Then it will be completely worthless, he finally concluded. Was this guy bluffing to scare him? Ling Han thought. However, Wally had never had any previous history of lying so far, and it seemed like he had not learned this skill either. Ling Han pondered for a while, and then asked, how much longer? About 200 million years, Wally estimated. Without further analysis, I can only come up with such a vague number. Ling Han was immediately relieved. The origin magic cube would only lose effect in another 200 million years. There was still a lot of time. He patted a hand on Wally's shoulder, and said, don't worry. I will give this to you before it loses its value. Wally nodded. The sooner the better. Otherwise, the power of origin would only become more and more complex and encrypt itself heavily. The difficulty level for my decoding would also become higher and higher. Chapter 23:13 switched. It was not that Ling Han did not trust Wally. This guy believed in equal exchange, and definitely could be trusted. However, if he took the origin magic cube, it would be like the scroll as well, just stuffing it somewhere into his robes and slowly refining it going by his words. This was an analysis of some kind of energy composition and a decoding of its formula and module. Then, he would be able to extract the power of heaven and earth himself to fuse it. Ling Han understood it, but had absolutely no concept about it. What formula and module? So what if he knew it? The formula and module can be considered the equivalent of your cultivation technique, Wally explained. However, the cultivation technique teaches you how to use the regulations, while the formula and module are decrypting the power of heaven and earth so that you can channel the source power of a Genesis world. Do you understand now? No. Ling Han shook his head. Then I will explain it to you again. Wally was astonishingly patient. Because he had accepted Ling Han's debtor's note, he thought that he had the duty to guide Ling Han. Ling Han was getting a headache. What I want you to do is to calculate the deficiencies I have had in my path of cultivation, and not try and impress me. He knew that this magic soup should be a key to helping him walk towards a path of greater strength, but he really could not understand at present. Hence, he chose the more direct route, and that was to increase his battle prowess first before all else. When he had reached a certain level, he would naturally be able to understand. Wally nodded, and continued to analyze the detailed problems about his cultivation for Ling Han. He had entered into a high-level dimension, and had already leaped from the regulations themselves to the power of heaven and earth in his understanding of power. From a certain aspect, he was a heavenly venerate, and a heavenly venerate of a high-level dimension at that. This was extremely helpful for Ling Han. He was practically recultivating with the regulations of a high-level dimension. Your evolution index has actually improved slightly in such a short period of time. Wally appeared disbelieving. You are extraordinary. I know. Ling Han was utterly shameless, and directly accepted this compliment. If it was the Empress bewitching Maiden Ro, and the others, they would probably laugh at Ling Han for being shameless, but Wally was merely telling the truth as it was. His expression was unchanging and the tone completely serious. Wally was definitely a responsible teacher. He pointed out the problems to Ling Han one after another detailedly with incredible patience. Even if Ling Han asked 7 or 8 times consecutively because he did not fully understand a problem, Wally's emotions would not change in the slightest. A chill suddenly rose up in Ling Han. If Wally decided to become a great villain, with his terrifying ability of calculation and estimation, added with his calmness and patience, just what kind of frightening consequences could it cause? No wonder they had needed several hundred epochs just to produce one of him. If he could be mass-produced, that would be a calamity to all the other realms. Time passed swiftly. It had long since passed the time that Yu Yuan had determined, but the residents of the Angel Quarters seemed to have completely forgotten this matter. No one actually jumped out to make any complaints. Only later was it discovered that Yu Yuan had also gone to where Ling Han and the others had previously gone. He had probably been trapped there, and could not come out for the moment, and that was why he had not had the time to cause trouble for Ling Han. Originally, Ling Han had not been concerned. He had been cultivating inside the Black Tower all this while, and would occasionally ask Wally for advice. Just a year later, he had broken through to the Immortal Palace tier. He had modified the pill recipe for the 1000-year dream pill so that the medicinal ingredients of the foreign realm could also be used. He became incredibly low-key. A few decades later, the Empress and Hunyo both reached dividing 9 souls, and bewitching Maiden Ro was the first to advance into the Immortal Palace tier. That was because she had originally been in this cultivation level, so her speed was naturally high. Another 100 years passed, and Ling Han had finally reached the second secret again. It seemed like more than 10,000 years had been wasted. Walking a large circle. His cultivation level was still the same as when he had fled from the celestial realm. However, if he were to return to the celestial realm, his battle prowess would be multiplied by 10-fold, at least. If it is now, in a battle of equals, Ji Wuming should no longer be my match. Ling Han suddenly felt a profound despondency. Having a strong rival that he could contend with, or even someone stronger than himself, so that he could chase after him was actually a kind of motivation. However, Ji Wuming is a reincarnated 9th heaven celestial king. In the past, he was practically an invincible existence. Reincarnating and cultivating again from the beginning, he should not be so simple, either. I still have several tens of billions of years before I can return to the celestial realm. Who knows? Maybe he will have already become a heavenly venerate by then. I really want to spar with him. The high-speed spiking period of his cultivation level was over because his cultivation level finally completely corresponded to his actual cultivation level. There was no way he could just depend on comprehension of regulations to directly increase his cultivation level, but rather had to do so both physically and spiritually. This could not be rushed. Without genuine natural treasures, he might only be able to advance to the next minor level every 100 million years. Because he also needed physical cultivation, he frequently used the time cultivation chamber of the Academy. The highest rate of time acceleration was 1000x, and the Academy was wide open for a monarch star like him, with no conditions attached. Several more years later, news spread out. Yu Yuan had finally come out of that realm, and the next 1000 Academy tournament was also about to begin. The Academy would be holding selections for elites that would participate in this major event. Yu Yuan would definitely be going, and there was only 10 for the total number, which meant that there were only 9 positions that could be contended for. Is Yu Yuan finally about to return? Ling Han smiled faintly. He had long since wanted to have a battle with this monarch star. The latter actually dared to have thoughts about the Empress. Just see how Ling Han would deal with him. The Academy decided that a contest to select the 9 representatives would be held 3 days later. For Ling Han, the good news was that the Empress and Hu Niu had also returned to the Immortal Palace tier, and had even surpassed him once more in cultivation level, reaching the height of 5th secret. In other words, everyone's cultivation level had finally returned to their starting line. 3 days passed, and selections began. Because those that had reached the Immortal Palace tier or 8th Lotus were naturally considered seeded candidates, and had no need to join the preliminary selections, Ling Han, the Empress, Hu Niu, and Bewitching Maiden Ro had all automatically advanced to the next round. In truth, aside from Monarch Stars, who could match Immortal Palace tier when they themselves were only dividing Soul tier? Thus, as long as the number of Immortal Palace tiers exceeded 9, the others would naturally have no interest in participating. In the final rounds, aside from Ling Han and his group, it was Sun Feng and Wu Ya from the Angel Quarters, Mutal Unju, and Magyufai from the Demon Quarters. A yellow bull and a snow leopard represented the holy beasts, and the insect race sent a giant bee. As for Lu Yuanxin, because he could not bring himself to face the public, it was natural that he could not participate. There were a total of 12 people, and only 3 would be eliminated. Every single person had to fight 11 matches. The 3 people who had won the least number of matches would be eliminated, while the others would enter the final name list of participation. The battles began. Because they were all monarch tiers, aside from Ling Han, the battle prowess of those at equal cultivation levels was practically the same. Thus, the cultivation level had become especially important. After 2 days of battles, the snow leopard, the bee, and Mutal were eliminated, while the others successfully advanced. However, only a single day later, the Academy suddenly released an announcement, announcing that Ling Han's place was removed, and Lu Yuanxin would be going in his stead. When this news was out, the masses immediately erupted in an uproar. How could that be allowed? If the Academy would be appointing who would be participating, then what need was there for the selection battles? Very soon, some well-informed sources revealed the truth. As it turned out, Yu Yuan had exerted pressure on the Academy, saying that if Ling Han was not withdrawn, he would not be participating in the 1000 Academy tournament this time. Though Ling Han was also a monarch star, and had boundless future prospects, and would definitely become a brilliant star of the Academy as well, how could he possibly be as important as Yu Yuan now? Thus, he had been switched. Chapter 23:14 Barging into the Angel Quarters. When Ling Han heard about this, he was naturally extremely displeased. He had absolutely no intentions to battle for the foreign realm, but if he could get a high ranking while participating in the 1000 Academies tournament, the Academy would also offer astonishing rewards. What he was displeased about was this. Furthermore, Yu Yuan coveted his woman, and now had come around to cause him trouble. This was also what Ling Han could not accept. "We will withdraw as well," the Empress said. "That's right. That damn monkey, Niu is going to beat him until he bursts." Hu Niu was also aggressive. Ling Han pondered, and said, "Previously, the angel race has barged in. This time, it should be our turn." Sure. Hu Niu immediately clapped her hands. She was a little demon king that delighted in having the world in chaos in the first place, so she naturally supported Ling Han's plan to commit a massacre. However, this could possibly deepen the conflict between the angel race and demon race, Bewitching Maiden Ro said. Ling Han shrugged. "If they want to fight, they can just go ahead. What does it have to do with us?" Now that Bewitching Maiden Ro thought about it, he was right. She had been disguising herself as one of the angel race for too long, and unknowingly had placed herself in their shoes. Then let's charge over. The four of them left the demon quarters, and went all the way to the angel quarters. Actually, whether it was the demon quarters, the angel quarters, the insect quarters, or the holy beast quarters, they did not have any walls or gates. It was just that the four of them were located in the four corners of the academy, respectively, with a very great distance separating each from the other. Hence, the four of them entering into the angel quarters was very easily done. It was only when the masses discovered Ling Han, who was a member of the demon quarters, that a commotion began. A member of the demon quarters had actually barged into the angel quarters. This was a provocation. Instantly, multiple angels walked out. A great many who had gotten the news also appeared, all of them standing on the streets, and staring at Ling Han coldly. No one dared to make a move. Who did not know that Ling Han was an 8th Lotus-level monarch star? Furthermore, the angel quarters only had a total of 3 8th Lotus monarch tiers. If they did not move, who would be able to stop Ling Han? Right, they forgot to count the Empress and the others in, but judging by the intimate manner in which they walked side by side with Ling Han, who could hope that they would turn around to deal with Ling Han? Bah! Lu Yuanxin was the first to jump out. After he was humiliated by Lu Yuanxin, there were a great many years he had not dared to step out of his doors. However, he was a monarch tier after all, and had been earnestly cultivating all this while. Added with how his clan was also pouring all their efforts into nurturing him, his cultivation level improved extremely quickly. At present, he was an 8th Lotus 3rd leaf. He wanted revenge. 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 Ling Han couldn't help but grin, and replied, "Good son, long time no see." Lu Yuanxin exploded with fury. He was really too furious, so he actually forgot that there was a trap hidden in Ling Han's name. In the end, he screwed himself over again. "I'm going to kill you." He moved furiously. Xiao, his figure leaped out, and charged towards Ling Han. Scram! The Empress's eyes widened, and a frightening aura surged out. Her delicate hand shot out, and turned into a great mountain that blasted towards Lu Yuanxin. Pang! Lu Yuanxin was instantly sent flying so hard like a cannonball that there was no further sight of him. It should be known that not only was the Empress presently a 5th secret monarch star, but had also merged the regulations of the two realms, so her battle prowess completely surpassed that of any monarch star that was her equal in cultivation level. This naturally was incredibly frightening. A 3rd secret monarch tier? Just a piece of cake for her. The residents of the angel quarters were all dumbfounded. Previously, though the Empress had slightly shown her prowess in battle, she had not displayed her full strength. Who could have imagined that her battle prowess would be so powerful? Furthermore, she was clearly a member of the angel race, so why had she chosen to help one of the demon race? Xing, what is the meaning of this? Wuya also appeared. His eyes were set on the Empress. His gaze held adoration, but at the same time was also filled with confusion and wariness. The Empress merely swept a cold look at him, and did not even deign to reply at all. Wu Ya's expression involuntarily became ugly, and he said, "Don't think that just because Yuan likes you, you can simply put on airs in front of me." The Empress raised a slender brow, and moved directly. Xiao, she arrived in front of Wu Ya in a flash. She sliced out with a palm, and regulations bloomed, dazzling and bright. Pang! Wu Ya moved to parry. With a slight movement, he already blocked this strike from the Empress, and the latter was still sent flying back about 300 meters. One was a 5th secret, while the other was a 7th secret. Even the identity of Monarch Star could not make up for the difference in their cultivation level. After all, Wu Ya was also a monarch tier. However, Wu Ya's expression became even uglier. He had sparred with the Empress before. At that time, the Empress had practically admitted defeat directly, so he had thought that the Empress was just a monarch tier as well. But now that they had traded blows, he found out that the Empress was definitely no monarch tier, but rather a monarch star. Heavens, monarch stars were really too rare. Even in the entire 100 Battles Academy, Yu Yuan was the only one, and it was just this one monarch star that had gained the 72nd place for the 100 Battles Academy in the entire foreign realm. The strength of monarch star was clearly extraordinary, and their rarity was the same as well. Yet now, first, Ling Han had popped up, and now there was another Empress. What was going on here? Even monarch stars could emerge in bursts? The Empress returned, and charged back towards Wu Ya. Her wish to defeat Wu Ya was practically an impossible feat, but for Wu Ya to defeat her, he would also need to expend extremely great effort. Humph! Sun Feng appeared. He was stronger than Wu Ya. With his hands crossed behind his back, he emanated an incredible air of confidence. He thought that he could subdue the Empress in 100 moves. After all, he was an 8th lotus 8th leaf. However, because Wu Ya was actually enjoying the upper hand, he naturally would not interfere as well. Instead, he set his eyes on Ling Han. You are quite courageous, to actually dare to run over to the angel quarters of your own volition. What, is this a tiger's den? Ling Han chuckled. It is innumerable times more frightening than that. Sun Feng moved angrily. At the time, the three of them had barged into the demon quarters, but Lu Yuanxin had been left behind in the end. This had become a laughing matter for the entire angel quarters, sustaining the merciless mockery and ridicule of the insect race and holy beast quarters, and this time, if Ling Han was allowed to withdraw completely unscathed, the pride of the angel quarters would really be lost, and they would never be able to hold their heads high again. Damn insect, Niu will fight you. Hu Niu leaped out, battling fiercely with Sun Feng. However, there was not much of a gap between her battle prowess and that of the Empress, which was naturally very far from enough to match Sun Feng. The moment they traded blows, she fell into a disadvantage. However, this little girl had already cultivated the greatest eternity immortal physique, and now that her cultivation level had attained that level, this physique was once again unlocked. She continuously dissolved into the flow of time. At one instant, she would be in the past, and at another she would be in the future, and thus could effectively evade Sun Feng's attacks. For the moment, there was definitely no risk that she would be defeated. Everyone was once more stunned at this, their mouths gaping widely. This was another monarch star. Gods! There were actually 4 monarch stars in the 100 Battles Academy. This was practically powerful to a chilling extent. If another 1 million years passed, these 4 would probably reach the height of 11th leaf, and they would definitely be able to crush the 1000 Academies tournament by then. Sun Feng was also numb with shock. Why did Yu Yuan have such an incredibly extraordinary high status? That was because he was a monarch star. And now Hu Niu was also a monarch star, which proved that she would also be able to achieve a similar status to Yu Yuan's in the future. Then, now that he was offending her like this, wouldn't it be digging a trap for himself? But now it was impossible for him to stop halfway. He could only grit his teeth and continue. As for how the future would unfold, he did not consider it first. He hoped that Yu Yuan would have a way to resolve this. Ling Han crossed his arms over his chest, and laughed. Anyone else wants to stop me? The angel race exchanged looks, and no one made a sound. Whoever stepped up would only be asking for their own suffering, right? How truly arrogant. A voice rang out, menacing and icy. Chapter 23:15 suppressed instead. Yu Yuan. Lord Yu Yuan. Senior brother Yu Yuan. When they heard this senior brother, the members of the angel race all looked excited. He was a young great monarch. In the future, he would be able to sit loftily above the 9 heavens, and look down on all life. In fact, it was even possible that he could surpass the regulations, and become a heavenly venerate that looked down on the rest of the world. In everyone's eyes, there was no opponent that Yu Yuan could not deal with. Yu Yuan appeared. He was an indescribably handsome man. His feathered wings snow-white with gold at the edges, and looked incredibly handsome. His hair was golden, each strand looking like it had been woven from gold, and the halo above his head was also golden in color, glowing with divine light such that he looked like a god of war in golden armor. However, his expression was very cool, as if everyone else in the world was only an ant in his eyes. He was completely emotionless. He looked at Ling Han, and did not repeat the mistakes that others had made. He asked, "Have you come to beg for mercy?" Ling Han couldn't help but lament too bad secretly. This guy actually had not called him father. He smiled faintly and said, "Hee hee, I saw that today was sunny and had fair weather, so I decided to have a barbecue feast here. You don't mind, right? To have a barbecue here? You haven't eaten meat for 3 lifetimes, right?" A mere member of the demon race actually dared to come into the angel quarters for a picnic, Just how uncaring could you be? However, everyone knew that Ling Han was only purposely saying this. In truth, he had come to crash in on them and cause trouble for them. In truth, Ling Han had done so. In any case, everyone was feeling very displeased. Two great beauties of their race actually betrayed them to help Ling Han, and they were extremely rare monarch stars at that. Anyone would be throwing up blood at that thought. How had their delicate flowers fallen prey to a pig? Then you are seeking death. Yu Yuan sneered. His expression did not change in the slightest. It was like he did not know how to smile or feel anger. Ling Han couldn't help but laugh. Your expression is quite similar to that of someone else I know. You have no idea what smiling is. It can't be that the two of you are brothers, right? The person he was talking about was naturally Wally, and if that guy was here, he would definitely list out proof to show just how many differences there were between him and Yu Yuan, and assert that the chances that the two of them were brothers was endlessly close to zero. Meanwhile, the residents of the Angel Quarters were furious. Ling Han actually dared to tease their monarch star, which filled them with indignant fury. Yu Yuan, on the other hand, had no change in expression. He glanced at the Empress, and turned his eyes back on Ling Han. Kneel and beg for mercy, and I can spare you. He had never been a merciful man. When he found out that there was an unknown relationship between Ling Han and the Empress, he had already passed the penalty of death on Ling Han. However, before Ling Han died, he wanted to cut off all thoughts that the Empress had for Ling Han. The simplest method was to have the Empress see Ling Han's ugliness as he knelt and begged humbly. Ling Han naturally knew Yu Yuan's thoughts well. He chuckled. What meaning is there to waste your breath on such nonsense? Just come on, and let me see the strength of the top elite of the academy. Yu Yuan was disdainful. A mere 8th lotus second leaf. So what if you are a monarch star? In front of me, you will not even withstand a single strike. He took a step forwards. Immediately, a frightening aura roared out like the great ocean, causing everyone to feel the urge to kneel and worship this young great monarch. Furthermore, a white lotus flower appeared on his forehead, and it had 8 petals and 10 leaves. Hiss! Yu Yuan was actually an 8th lotus 10th leaf already. He was really just a small step away from the true pinnacle of 8th lotus, and with his freakish genius, he would definitely be able to take that last step successfully. Yu Yuan! All the members of the angel race cheered, shaking the entire academy. They only knew that Yu Yuan was very strong, but no one knew that he had actually attained this kind of height. He was like a great mountain that they could only look up to. The other 3 quarters heard the commotion, and came over to watch the excitement as well. What, Ba actually wants to spa with Yu Yuan? Though he is also a monarch star, their cultivation levels are too far apart. There is no way that he could be his match. Being able to parry 2 to 3 strikes should be his limit, right? 2 to 3 strikes? Think about it, there is a total of 8 minor levels separating the two of them. It will be an insta-kill. I can bet anything with you on this gamble. It will definitely be an insta-kill. This is an undoubtable matter. 1 strike, and there definitely cannot be any more than that. If it was Xing or Niu, they may be able to parry a few more strikes. They are 5th leaf monarch stars, after all. Gods, our academy actually has 4 monarch stars. It should be known that even the top Tiger Roar Academy has just 2. We will definitely become the strongest academy in the future. Everyone chattered excitedly. They naturally did not have much optimism about Ling Han, and instead thought that the Empress and Hu Niu were stronger. And it was amidst the sounds of this discussion that Ling Han drew the divine demon sword. He was no idiot. With a gap of 8 minor levels, he would actually challenge another monarch star. He naturally had something to depend on, and it was the divine demon sword. Come on! Ling Han's right hand held the sword while he beckoned Yu Yuan over with his left hand, his expression extremely disdainful. Yu Yuan's eyes blinked slightly. This was an omen that he was feeling killing intent. If you won't make your move, fine, I'll do it. Ling Han released a battle cry, and charged out first. With him waving the divine demon sword in a flash of sword chi swept out in 4 strikes. There was no need to even make contact. Merely the sight of them would cause a stabbing pain in your eyes. This was divine metal, the toughest metal in the entire world, and could also be forged into the sharpest weapon. Even if it had not been upgraded to the height of celestial tool, it still possessed extremely great might. Yu Yuan frowned, and he actually did not dare to face it head-on as he bounced away. It could not be helped. The divine demon sword was too sharp, and he was still at the level of the immortal palace tier. There was no way he could use superior power to deliver a strike from a distance that would cause the divine demon sword to slip from Ling Han's hand. Gasp! Everyone exclaimed in shock. At first, they had thought that Ling Han would be insta-killed by Yu Yuan, but now? Not only had he not been insta-killed, he had even forced Yu Yuan into evasion. This was completely beyond expectations. Just relying on the might of your treasured tool. Humph, nothing out of the ordinary. Yu Yuan was not just evading. As his hands flipped and danced, multiple harsh flashes of sword light were also sweeping towards Ling Han. Ling Han laughed, and disdainfully retorted, "It is just that your cultivation level is slightly higher than mine. If it was a battle of equal cultivation levels, without using any strong weapon, I would definitely defeat you in 100 moves." Arrogance! Yu Yuan humped coldly, not even deigning to refute. He had long since become an invincible monarch star. There was no need for him to defeat Ling Han in a battle of equals to prove his own strength. Then you can just continue running like this. Ling Han brandished the divine demon sword. Any attack that rushed towards him would be sliced in half. Furthermore, his stamina had long since reached the level of the ascending origin tier, so the speed of his attacks was astonishingly fast. There was absolutely no need for him to worry that Yu Yuan's attacks would be too close together, and he would miss out on one or two of them. In this exchange, over 100 blows were traded. Indeed, Yu Yuan could only sustain blows from Ling Han. It was not that his strength was inferior to Ling Han's, but rather that the sword in Ling Han's hands was too powerful. For an immortal palace tier to possess a celestial tool, what kind of concept was that? Everyone was rendered mute. Even if everyone knew that this was not because Yu Yuan's strength was outmatched, they still felt their scalps go numb. When had they seen Yu Yuan fall into a disadvantage in a battle of equals? What more when Ling Han's cultivation level was far inferior to his? Fine, I will suppress my cultivation level to battle with you. Yu Yuan roared in fury. He was about to die of sullenness. Chapter 23:16 Battle of Equals. Yu Yuan was the top elite of the academy. Even among all the 8th lotuses of the entire foreign realm, Yu Yuan was also a top-tier existence. Yet now he was actually driven into a tizzy by a mere second lotus, which made him feel both sullen and furious. It was not that he had no weapon he could not draw. However, before it could even touch the divine demon sword, it would be broken in half with just a sweep of sword chi. Having a demon charge all the way into the angel quarters, with himself being suppressed, if he did not defeat Ling Han, what face would he have left as the top elite of the academy? Hence, he would rather choose a battle of equal levels. He was confident that his strength was still sufficient for defeating Ling Han. Ling Han slanted a disdainful look at him, yet still withdrew the divine demon sword. "No longer acting the coward?" he asked with a laugh, his mockery evident. Yu Yuan's breath quickened. There had never been anyone that dared to act arrogant in front of him. Anyone who dared do so had all been killed by him. But the problem now was that he really had no possibility of killing Ling Han. This naturally made him feel incredibly uncomfortable. "Disaster comes from a reckless tongue," he threatened menacingly. Ling Han chuckled. "Your eyes have gone blind if you dare to covet even my woman. Moreover, you even played dirty tricks on me. If I don't beat you into a pig's head, I will not be able to vent this anger." "Your woman?" Yu Yuan couldn't help but rage. The first time he set eyes on the Empress, he was already deeply captivated. What an exquisite beauty, with such majestic bearing, so noble, so proud. Only this kind of woman was worthy of him. If that had not been the case, he would not have targeted Ling Han deliberately. How could Ling Han be worthy? "You are seeking death," he roared, the lotus flower on his forehead trembling. One after another, the leaves disappeared. He was forcefully suppressing his cultivation level. Otherwise, once Ling Han drew the divine demon sword again, he would still only be able to run and hide. Of course, even if he suppressed his cultivation level, it was possible that Ling Han would still draw the divine demon sword again. This would depend on Ling Han's trustworthiness. Finally, he became 8th Lotus Second Leaf, completely equal to Ling Han's present cultivation level. He took a deep breath and stretched out his right hand. Wang wang wang. Multiple seals lit up on his arm, and the halo above his head blazed like a sun. His wings flapped, and his whole figure was lifted into the air, as if a war god had descended from the heavens. Countless women of the angel race were completely enraptured with this scene as their hearts all beat faster. They wanted nothing more than to throw themselves into the arms of this mighty, handsome man. In comparison, Ling Han, as a member of the demon race, was really too ugly, covered completely with red skin and bearing distorted features. Only celestial maiden Yunhe was an exception. Her mind was filled with Ling Han's heroic image inside the mystery realm. Even if her memory was missing a few crucial scenes, her heart was still moved. However, this was the angel quarters, and she could not cheer Ling Han on in broad daylight and full public. Ling Han scoffed and swept a glance at him. "Birdman, I will beat you down onto the ground in 100 moves at most." "How dare you?" Yu Yuan roared in fury. With a flap of his wings, he shot forwards and charged over to Ling Han. The halo above his head suddenly exploded with light that was off the charts. Even the spectators in the surroundings found their vision completely overtaken by golden light, and could not see anything else at all. This was the full power blow of an 8th Lotus second leaf monarch star. It was natural that not many below 8th Lotus could see clearly. Only those 3 8th Lotus monarch tiers could see that Yu Yuan turned into a streak of light, sending a punch right at Ling Han. Ling Han cracked a grin, and suddenly delivered a punch. Boom! When this punch was shot out, the air was instantly compressed. Pong, 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 endless creases were formed. The scene was really bizarre. Space could actually be creased. With how powerful his stamina was, it had long since advanced into ascending origin tier. Thus, even when he attacked later, it was his attack that reached first, and directly shot right in front of Yu Yuan. Yu Yuan was stunned, and concentrated his spiritual power without a second thought. A giant hand of light was formed in front of his face, meeting the punch that Ling Han delivered. How could it be so fast? He roared inwardly. This kind of attack speed was completely illogical. Pang! Ling Han's fist crashed into the giant hand of light, and with a boom, this large hand of light immediately shattered, and the fist penetrated it deeply, continuing to blast towards Yu Yuan's face. What? Seeing this scene, Wu Ya, Sun Feng, and Lu Yuanxin were all exclaiming soundlessly. Their cultivation levels were similar, and they were both monarch stars, so their strength should be extremely close. No, Yu Yuan's cultivation level might have been repressed to second leaf, but it was definitely the peak stage of the second leaf, and it was possible that Ling Han had not reached the peak stage. Perhaps he was only in the late stage, middle stage, or even early stage. In other words, the chance that Yu Yuan had an advantage in cultivation level was still very high, though this advantage might be very small. Yet Ling Han had practically managed to suppress Yu Yuan with a single punch. How could this be? If it had been someone else, they would probably have had to suffer this loss helplessly. But Yu Yuan was a monarch star. Countless divine swords of light actually surged out from his body, and swept towards Ling Han's fist. This was an amazing move. Not only could it resolve his own crisis, it could also cause a severe injury to Ling Han. Who asked the latter to actually dare to penetrate deeply with just a single fist? A battle at close quarters was a great taboo among cultivators, unless one had an absolute advantage in strength. Ling Han laughed. Lightning wrapped around his fist, and he had absolutely no intention to withdraw his fist. Pang! His fist landed on Yu Yuan's face, and xiao, countless swords of light also landed on his fist and arm at the same time. Yu Yuan was sent back several dozen meters, the halo above his head dimming, which also allowed the masses to recover their sight. What? When they could see clearly, everyone was gaping, and felt a chill run down their spines. Disbelief was written all over their faces. There was actually a trace of blood at the corners of Yu Yuan's lips. Hiss! Yu Yuan had actually been injured. How could they believe this? He was the top elite of the academy, and had led the academy to win the first place of the 1000 Academy tournament 1 million years ago, yet now he had actually been injured with a single blow, and it was a strike to the face at that. Who would believe this if they heard it? However, the young prodigies of all 4 quarters were here, and they all witnessed it with their own eyes. Was this really not an illusion that Ling Han had created? You deserve death. Yu Yuan roared to the heavens. Though his counterattack had all landed on Ling Han's arm, It had not caused any harm. Ling Han's physique was incredibly strong. When he spoke these 3 words, even his voice was trembling. That was because Ling Han had used the regulations of lightning in this punch, electrocuting him to numbness, so his voice was naturally stuttering when he spoke. Ling Han only flicked his hand in response, and said, "What a hard-skinned face, my hand is slightly aching from the impact." Everyone was speechless. You struck his face with your fist, and you actually said that his face was too hard, so your hand hurts now? Wasn't that simply mockery? Yu Yuan's expression became solemn. He had already forcefully suppressed his fury. He looked coldly, and with a shake of his hands, a blade of light appeared in his hold. This was not an actual weapon, but a blade he had manifested through spiritual power and regulations. I did not expect that you have actually cultivated the regulations of lightning. The regulations of lightning had frightening destructive power. Even now, there was still a fizzling in his body, and his blood was filled with violent factors, affecting the flow of his spiritual power. He adjusted his attitude completely. In this academy, there really was someone that could threaten his soul dominance. However, the regulations of light are not the only regulations I cultivate. He exuded a terrifying killing intent. It was as if his whole person had turned into an executioner's blade, capable of destroying the whole world. Chapter 23:17 Roasted Wing. Ling Han's eyes narrowed slightly. Regulation of slaughter. Good that you know, Yu Yuan said proudly. He had been able to cultivate until dividing 9 souls because he had obtained a source power of heaven and earth, as well as 8 different incomparable natural treasures. The sole source power of heaven and earth was the regulation of slaughter. He had never shown it before. Everyone thought that he had only cultivated the regulations of light, and he had originally intended to leave this trump card to be used in the 1000 Academy tournament. In the last 1000 Academy tournament, he had only been at the 4th leaf, and had not obtained this source power of heaven and earth yet. The fact that he had gained a source power of heaven and earth meant that he had heaven-defyingly good luck. This was something that even a great many ancestral kings would covet, and was also another reason why he had hidden it all this time. Yet now, he could not hold himself back. Ling Han crooked a finger. "Come, I shall oblige." Yu Yuan's figure charged out. With a roar, the regulation of slaughter manifested into a long spear, as red as if it was dyed in blood. Boom, the spear shot out like lightning, intending to stab Ling Han to death. Ling Han still used the regulations of lightning, and used the fists of fury, meeting Yu Yuan's attack. In a battle of equals, whom had he ever feared? Pang, pang, pang. The 2 great prodigies traded blows. Yu Yuan only parried a few strikes, and his expression changed drastically. That was because every punch he parried from Ling Han would cause his whole body to shudder and feel an indescribable discomfort. He could not believe it. Actually, he had not just cultivated the 2 regulations of slaughter and light, but had touched on every kind of regulation. However, he had focused on these 2 regulations, and merely touched lightly on the rest. He had not studied them too deeply or thoroughly, but this did not prevent him from having a vague understanding of every kind of great Tao. The attack of regulations that Ling Han was presently delivering was definitely not ordinary. It was too powerful, surpassing the extent that a 2nd leaf should have. As expected of a monarch star, he had very good senses. That was because the regulation of lightning that Ling Han was presently channeling was indeed stronger. It had assimilated the regulations of 2 realms. However, what use was it even if he had good instincts? Yu Yuan was still being suppressed by Ling Han, and had completely fallen into a disadvantage. Everyone was numb with shock, rendered completely incapable of speech. They knew that Ling Han was also a monarch star, but shouldn't it be a match of equals for 2 monarch stars to clash in a battle of equal cultivation levels? However, the present situation was completely one-sided. It was extremely clear that Yu Yuan was at a disadvantage, and could only manage to parry. This was more like the crushing advantage that a monarch star had over a monarch tier. Why was it like this? They naturally did not know that Ling Han's evolution index was endlessly close to 11. What kind of concept was this? It meant that he was practically another level stronger than any ordinary monarch star, and that was indeed equivalent to the suppression that monarch stars had over monarch tiers. Boom, boom, boom. Fists of fury shot out in a barrage, and Yu Yuan's expression became uglier and uglier. He used all the means he had and whatever ultimate moves that he knew, but he was ultimately still completely suppressed by Ling Han. The limit of 100 moves was close at hand, and he could no longer hold on anymore. Yu Yuan's eyes were bloodshot. He could not accept losing to another in a battle of equals, and it was within 100 moves at that. Die! He roared in fury, and the lotus flower on his forehead instantly grew 8 leaves. He had released his suppression on his cultivation level, and regained his full battle prowess. Boom! His battle prowess instantly exploded. Slicing out a palm, his strike directly ripped through space, capable of instantly slicing Ling Han into pieces. Ling Han humphed coldly, and had already drawn the divine demon sword, sweeping it out in a sideways slice. Pu Yu Yuan's left wing instantly flew into the air, the light of blood filling the skies, as if the heavens itself were weeping in grief. Ah! Yu Yuan stepped back continuously while showing an expression of incredible agony, his only remaining wing flapping frantically. So what if he had exploded? Don't forget that Ling Han had a powerful weapon. It was because he could not hold up to the might of the divine demon sword that he was compelled to agree to a battle of equals with Ling Han. In his utter fury, he initially wanted to launch an unexpected attack on Ling Han, yet did not expect that Ling Han had been on guard against him all this while. As a result, it was instead his wing that had been severed. He lost. Yu Yuan lost. Did this mean that the world was about to change completely? This Ba was too frightening, wasn't he? In a battle of equals, he only needed around 100 moves to defeat Yu Yuan. He was too indescribably freakish. In the future, the world was Ba's, the era of Ba. Yu Yuan's fury could not be stemmed. His true strength was superior to Ling Han's by who knew how many times over, yet because the latter had a god tool, he was completely helpless, and in a battle of equals, he actually was no match for Ling Han either, which made him feel a strong feeling of helplessness. This made him think back to those supreme freaks that he had encountered in the last 1000 Academy tournament. They had also caused this feeling of helplessness to rise up in him. No one making any more noise, right? Ling Han asked, smiling. Flopping down onto the ground, he took out a barbecue grill, and then picked up the severed wing of Yu Yuan. After plucking all the feathers, and using clean water to wash away the traces of blood and dust, he placed it on the barbecue grill. This. Everyone grimaced. That was Yu Yuan's wing. The majority of essence of the angel race was concentrated in their 2 wings. To others, this was indeed a great nutritious tonic, yet you actually grilled it in public. This was too unreasonable, wasn't it? Hunyou and the other women chuckled, and naturally joined immediately. The 4 of them sat at a corner respectively, and were just waiting for the wing to be completely cooked. This caused the residents of the angel quarters to burst with fury. The insect race and holy beasts were stunned, while the demon race exploded with raucous cheers. They exulted. After bearing for so many years, a supreme prodigy had finally emerged from the demon quarters, capable of stomping all over even Yu Yuan. Yu Yuan stared daggers at Ling Han. There were 2 options available to him if he wanted to defeat this opponent. Firstly, he could get himself a supreme weapon as well, one that could compare to the divine demon sword. Secondly, he could advance further, and cultivate the 11th secret. In that manner, his strength would leap into the ascending origin tier. Then, even if it was a punch delivered from a distance, he would be able to smash Ling Han into mush. Comparing the 2 options, it was naturally the latter that would be more easily realized. With a wave of his hand, he turned and left. Even if he stayed, it would only add to his grief. How could it be that he would be admiring these people chew on his own wing? With Yu Yuan's departure, the residents of the angel quarters, too, could not bring themselves to stay longer, and similarly returned to their own homes in dejection. This was clearly the angel quarters, yet it had become Ling Han's barbecue spot, and the others were all speechless from this. So aromatic. Hunyou salivated. This was the wing of a monarch star. Its nutrition value was not inferior to a great herb's, so she was naturally drooling. Ling Han, is it done yet? She asked delicately. Ling Han laughed and replied, yes, almost done. This wing had already been roasted to golden brown, emanating an alluring aroma. To say nothing of the 4 of them that were practically drooling, even those angels that had closed their doors were swallowing secretly. the concentrated essence of a monarch star, an extremely nutritious tonic. After another while, Ling Han took the wing off the barbecue grill. He cut off 3 parts, which he gave to the 3 women, and then retained 1 part. This was to be given to the women inside the Black Tower. Their cultivation level was too low. It was enough for them to eat just a little bit. Otherwise, it would be too much for them, and the excessive nutrition would kill them. The 4 of them feasted, and the sounds of many people gulping rang out from around them. This was really too aromatic, too alluring. When they had consumed this great feast, Ling Han patted his behind and stood up, returning to the demon quarters. The whole demon quarters had already erupted in uproar. Everyone was looking at him with eyes filled with admiration. If it were not that Ling Han was too aloof, there would be countless people approaching him for sure. He began to digest the essence inside the roasted meat. This was equivalent to a greatly nutritious celestial flower. Ling Han spent a whole 7 days to finally finish digesting it, and gain the qualifications to break through to the 3rd secret. Chapter 23:18 Third Secret. Initially, Ling Han had already reached the 2nd secret's late stage, and now he directly soared to the 2nd secret's peak stage with such nutrition. He swallowed a 1,000-year dream pill, and entered into the time stream. Since the foreign realm had regulations of time, it naturally also had the time stream. However, it could only be entered either through using the 1,000-year dream pill or forcefully barging into the place with the overwhelming might of the heavenly venerable tier. But even a heavenly venerate could not match the power of heaven and earth. Once they left the time stream, all their memories gained there would be erased. The past and present could not be reversed, and the future could not be changed. Ling Han comprehended Tao in this place where time ended. There was no concept of time here. It was possible that countless years would pass in an instant, and countless years here could also be a second in the outside world. This was the unit of time that Ling Han had learned from Wally, and he had accepted this concept and adopted it. Compared to counting time for a single jaw stick or a heartbeat, minutes and seconds were much more precise. Moreover, it could be further precise by proceeding to millisecond and microsecond. In this place, Ling Han easily broke through to the 3rd secret, but he did not immediately return. Instead, he continued comprehension here until the effects of the 1,000-year dream pill were completely used up, and only then did his spirit return to his physical body. The heavenly tribulation immediately came. He went to endure the heavenly tribulation, and a day later, his figure descended, having easily survived it. And in truth, his cultivation level had already reached the 3rd secret's middle stage. The essence contained in Yu Yuan's wing was truly amazing. Previously, he had not expended all the essence in full at all, and now he had comprehended another Tao where time ended. It seemed like it was just a while, yet the time that had actually passed was endless. Thus, once Ling Han had endured the heavenly tribulation, he absorbed and digested fully the remaining essence inside his body, and his cultivation level directly soared to the 3rd secret's middle stage. He returned to his quarters, yet immediately received a message from the Academy that he had once again gained the qualification to participate in the 1,000 Academy tournament. Going back and forth like this, was it fun? Ling Han knew that the Academy had seen how he had defeated Yu Yuan in a battle of equals, and thus determinedly placed bets on him. Even if Ling Han could not win a good placing for the Academy this time, there was probably no one that could manage to stop Ling Han in the next tournament. As a human, they naturally had to set their sights further. Of course, if he had been in the celestial realm, Ling Han would definitely have chosen just to cast this aside. Fuck, who do you think I am? Just coming at your slightest call, and dismissed with a wave? But now this was the foreign realm, and Ling Han did not do anything willful. He was determined to understand the cultivation system of the foreign realm. That way, he could deal with it in the future. He also wanted to know just what kind of level this generation of young prodigies of the foreign realm had reached. If they could possibly reach the heavenly venerable tier, should he find a chance to kill them off in advance? Additionally, he discovered that the wings of the angel race were all like celestial medicines, and eating more wings could help his cultivation level soar straight upwards. So why shouldn't he go and get himself some more? He was sure that only the monarch stars of the angel race would let him enjoy these effects, and there were pitifully few of them, so he would only be able to encounter them in the 1,000 Academy tournament. If the Academy knew that he agreed to go because he wanted to eat chicken wings, those old geezers would probably be shooting fire from their eyes in their fury. Not too many days later, the 10 prodigies set out under the leadership of 2 Ninth Lotus elites of the Academy, heading towards the 4 Splendor Academy. The 1000 Academy tournament this time round was held at the 4 Splendor Academy, but there was a boundless distance separating the two locations. If they were just to simply fly on their journey, they would probably need tens of millions of years to reach their destination. But though they had set out earlier, there was only 100 years' time left, and there was no way they could just journey there like that. What now? They would use the transfer formation then. There were transfer formations everywhere in the 4 Splendor Academy, which boundlessly shortened the distance between two locations. However, because the 4 Splendor Academy was really too far, they would still need about 30 years' time even with using the transfer formation. That was because they could not simply take the next transfer formation after using the first transfer formation, but rather had to journey part of the way. The tournament team of 10 was still Yu Yuan and 9 others that had emerged victorious from the selections. The ascending origin tiers leading the team were Yuan and Qi Shuang. Yuan was a member of the insect race, while Qi Shuang was a holy beast. The reason why no member of the angel race or demon race had been appointed as team leader was naturally because of the conflict between Ling Han and Yu Yuan. This was to avoid any prejudice, which could lead to the whole team falling apart in the end. They increased their journeying speed, and after over a dozen days, they arrived at a city, and then used the transfer formation for the first time. Traversing through space, they soon arrived at another city, but did not immediately continue their journey. Using a long-distance transfer formation would actually bring serious side effects to bear on the body. The physical body was under extremely unstable conditions. If one continuously used transfer formations, death would be a small matter. More importantly, one could burst in a massive explosion, destroying the transfer formation and the transfer passageway, and thus causing disastrous harm to others. Wally had also come with them. He disguised himself as a small ornament that hung from a corner of Ling Han's robes. One cannot continuously use the transfer formation, because traversing through space would affect the stability of the particles, and cause chaos among the nuclear electrons. It could very possibly turn the human body into a super-nuclear weapon, he explained. You have to understand that, in truth, every single existence is a creation of the heaven and earth, including us. The power of heaven and earth is constantly within us, but ordinary people are completely incapable of accessing it. According to the theories of the high-level dimension, every gram of quality that we expend could explode with a storm of energy capable of destroying a planet. You can just imagine just how terrifying our potential is. It was no wonder that the transfer formation could not be used continuously. It could make humans into a terrifying weapon. Given what you say, if we could use the power of heaven and earth, simply pick up a rock, and we can explode with boundless power? Ling Han asked. That's right. Wally nodded. Those who can use a limited extent of the power of heaven and earth would be those so-called heavenly venerates of yours. Hence, the strength of heavenly venerable tier completely overwhelmed celestial kings. Even a 9th heaven celestial king would only die a terrible death in front of a heavenly venerate. The power that both sides used was not on the same level at all. Ling Han felt strongly just how smart he had been to choose to cooperate with Wally. He had gained all the knowledge of a high-level dimension, and knowledge was the most central wealth of a realm. Cultivation techniques were actually a kind of knowledge as well, teaching you how to use regulations. After resting for 3 days, and using the transfer formation in the city again, they arrived at another city. This time, they did not rest any longer, but rather continued to exit the city and journey onwards. That was because the next transfer formation was at a very distant location. The time they took to journey there would be enough for them to dispel the side effects brought by using the transfer formation. And this was how they proceeded, stopping and continuing repeatedly on their journey. Occasionally, they would take a few days of rest, traversing the wide space of the foreign realm. Everyone did not waste their time. For those that had reached their cultivation level, they could cultivate just by walking and sleeping. It was only that their efficiency would be slightly lower than usual. 10 years later, they had already walked countless paths, and their speed was also slightly faster than they had expected. Half their journey had been completed. If everything went smoothly, they would be able to reach 4 Splendor Academy in another 10 years' time. On this day, they came out of a transfer formation to find some place to settle down. The next transfer formation was within this city itself. There was no need for them to journey elsewhere, and they could take a good rest for a while. However, they discovered that this city was extraordinarily familiar. Chapter 23:19 Blood of Ancestral King. Other cities would definitely not be as bustling as this, with so many people that it had become overcrowded. Cultivators of all shapes and sizes could be seen everywhere. There were members of various races, strong and weak, male and female, older and younger. Everyone was very curious. What exactly had happened here? Why had so many people come here? They made some inquiries. As it turned out, an auction would soon be held here, and a most precious treasure would be appearing at the auction. It was a bottle of blood from an ancestral king, and one that had reached 14th Lotus at that. When they heard this, everyone was extremely stirred up. Anything that belonged to a celestial king was a treasure. In truth, he was equivalent to a human-shaped celestial medicine, but no one could harvest him. And if one were to ask which part of this human-shaped great herb was the most valuable, that would undoubtedly and definitely had to be his blood essence. What was going on auction this time was only the blood of an ancestral king, not the blood essence of an ancestral king. In that case, the effects would be considerably poorer. Otherwise, the auctioneer would have long since advertised it far and wide. Upon further thought, it was true. With how rare blood essence was, even a celestial king could not possibly have a lot. It was the concentrated essence of a celestial king. Furthermore, would a celestial king sell off one of his body parts? If he wanted money, he would be able to get a countless amount easily. Hence, it was definite that this blood of an ancestral king had not been given out by an ancestral king voluntarily. It had to have either been spilled in a great battle, and someone just happened to pick it up, or it was a dead ancestral king, and someone harvested it from his corpse. To say nothing of Yu Yuan and the other immortal palace tiers, even the hearts of those two ascending origin tier elites throbbed wildly, wanting nothing more than to take it for their own. In any case, there was still a lot of time, and there were not many days until the auction began. Thus, everyone decided to stay a few more days here, and then set out again after the auction was over. Everyone was rubbing their fists eagerly. They were determined to get this bottle of ancestral king blood, and quietly did an accounting of their personal wealth to see if it was enough to purchase this portion of ancestral king blood. Seeing how many people had come here, it was clear how valuable this bottle of ancestral king blood would be. By then, the competition would definitely be extremely intense. There were only 7 days left until the day of the auction. Thus, they did not rest too many days, and set out, arriving at the auction site. Yu Yuan's longing was greatest. Even if he was a monarch star, and there was practically no bottleneck in the advancement of his cultivation, he would still need to accumulate enough power every time he broke through. Now, he needed a very long time to accumulate enough power so that he could store up enough for a timely burst, and rush up to the 11th secret in a single stroke. A bottle of ancestral king blood would definitely help him to take this step. Yu Yuan glanced at Ling Han unobtrusively. He only needed to take one step further, and he would deal with Ling Han. He would humiliate him in public, and then kill him in secret afterwards, getting rid of this guy that had embarrassed him once and for all. Wu Ya and Sun Feng were not willing to admit weakness, either. They were still a long way off from 11th secret, but with the help of a bottle of ancestral king blood, they would definitely be able to see some hope. The others were about the same. Even Yuan's and Qi Shuang's eyes were glowing. If they had a large supply of ancestral king blood, who knew, they might be able to break through and become ancestral kings. Though this hope was pitifully small, they still decided to obtain this bottle of ancestral king blood, even if it meant losing all their fortune. After a while, they arrived at the auction site. Wow, even though they had deliberately widened the auction site for the sake of the ancestral king blood, with 4 paths of entry in total, there was still a long line of people outside. Who knew how many people were filled with yearning for this bottle of precious blood? The expressions of those like Yu Yuan and his group were not very good. They had limited wealth on them. They merely had some starstones to help in cultivation and 1 or 2 celestial medicines to help in breaking through or to save their lives in a pinch, but it definitely could not be a great herb that was the level of the celestial king tier. But others had come prepared, so how could it be easy to defeat these people? Previously, Ling Han had killed over 100 ancestral kings through trickery in the neutral zone, so he naturally possessed astonishing wealth. However, he was not much interested in ancestral king blood, because though there were some ancestral kings that he had killed violently at the time, there were still a great many ancestral kings whose bodies had remained unscathed, and he had then stowed them into the Black Tower. If he wanted ancestral king blood, there would be a lot. In fact, he had a considerable amount of ancestral king blood essence as well. But if he were to directly use the ancestral king blood, the only possible result that would happen once he drank it would be death. There was too much power contained within, and the martial intent inside was too strong. It was not something that he presently could bear at all. If he wanted to consume it, he had to request the help of a supreme elite to help refine the harmful substances contained within. Otherwise, it would only be courting death. The fact that the ancestral king blood could be sold meant that the harmful substances within should already have been refined, and it could be directly used. What Ling Han was interested in was this technique of refining. If he could learn it, that would be equivalent to having obtained an astonishing amount of celestial king tier grade herbs. He split from the group with an excuse, and did not even have the 3 women follow him. Instead, he found an isolated corner, and made some alterations to his appearance. He had become a member of the angel race, and his aura also changed accordingly. However, he had not cultivated the regulations of light, and that would be revealed the moment he started a battle. The angel race could use the regulations of light by nature. Even if their main focus was not this type of regulations, they would still subconsciously use this regulation when they fought. He lined up and entered, and then sent a message to the staff of the auction house. "You said that you have something incredibly precious to sell?" A while later, an elder appeared. He was an 8th Lotus elite who was also a member of the angel race, but dark gray had already appeared at the tips of his feathered wings. This was because he had experienced too many instances of a mortal's tribulation, and that had already affected his body. With a few more rounds, he should no longer be able to stand here. Instead, he would have boils on his head and pus flowing from underneath his feet, and could die at any moment. Ling Han nodded. At first, the one who had served him was only a junior worker, but once he showed his cultivation level, and said that he had something important to be put on auction, it became this elder that came to serve him. "What is it?" the elder asked. Ling Han took out a jade bottle, and placed it on the table. The elder picked it up, and was just about to open it when he heard Ling Han say, "Be careful." He was unconcerned. Could it be that a ferocious beast was contained inside? With a paw, he uncorked the bottle, and an indescribable murderous aura instantly surged out, and his hand involuntarily trembled. Instantly, the bottle fell onto the ground. Ling Han moved quickly. He caught the bottle. Previously, he had fiddled with the corpses of ancestral kings. Though he still could not make direct contact with the body of an ancestral king, it was fine as long as there was a bottle between them, as long as the opening of the bottle was not facing him directly. Ling Han placed the bottle back on the table, and then smiled faintly. The elder couldn't help but look embarrassed. Ling Han had clearly warned him beforehand, yet he had still almost dropped the bottle. Who knew what kind of great loss that would have resulted in if it had really been damaged from the falls? He looked stunned. He only had to probe that violent aura, and he knew that the substance in the bottle was extraordinary. He looked towards the bottle again, and the expression on his face changed immediately. As a professional, he immediately entered into work mode, and set aside his previous embarrassment. Ancestral king blood. He paled in shock, and then his expression became strange. They had only obtained a portion of ancestral king blood after much difficulty, and now another bottle had appeared at this instance. Wasn't this too coincidental? However, it has not been refined. He frowned. This would affect the auction price. Chapter 2320 Spending Exorbitantly. Does your auctioneer's business have the means to purify ancestral king blood? Ling Han asked. No. The elder shook his head, and then continued. This is a secret technique, and is only grasped in the hands of a minority of forces. However, you need not be concerned. After all, there is not much ancestral king blood in this world. True, what ancestral king would be letting out blood out of boredom? Yet Ling Han thought, there are at least 100 ancestral king corpses that can be used inside the Black Tower. Just what kind of astounding wealth is this? Moreover, Ling Han had no plans on selling the ancestral king blood. Instead, he would retain it for his own use. In that case, he naturally wanted even more to obtain the method of refinement. Do you plan to trade this bottle of ancestral king blood for starstones, or to trade it for another item? The elder asked. If it is the former, we will collect 15% as service charge. If it is the latter, you have to pay us 100,000 starstones. The latter, Ling Han answered, and directly tossed over a spatial god tool. Then, he took out some starstones, and it just happened he had 100,000 left. Then what do you want to trade for? The elder asked. He naturally hoped that Ling Han would choose the former option. The value of a portion of Ancestral King was definitely 100 million starstones or above. Ling Han did not hesitate, and answered, the method to refine Ancestral King blood. The elder was surprised. He had already spoken very clearly, yet why was Ling Han still so dead set on it? With a thought, he couldn't help but inhale sharply, and exclaim, you do not just have one portion of Ancestral King blood. This number was definitely not small. Otherwise, even if you traded it for the method of refinement, so what? The increase in value would not be more than this portion of Ancestral King blood presently, and it would still be a loss. Do you have an Ancestral King in your family that can let out some blood any time you like? Though he was thinking this in his heart, the elder naturally would not be asking it out loud. A businessman should never be too curious. However, he still said something additional. If you have more Ancestral King blood, you can delegate us to help you sell it off. If there is a lot, our service charges can be further lowered. Furthermore, for our auction house, all personal information is definitely classified, and there is no need to worry about any trouble. Ling Han merely smiled in response. Firstly, he really had too much Ancestral King blood, and there was no way he would take it all out to be auctioned off, and secondly, how could he possibly trust someone else so easily? Oh, it would absolutely be classified just because they said it would be classified information. Of course, he had disguised himself presently, and actually did not fear that anyone would know that the Ancestral King blood had come from him. Most importantly, he too, indeed needed Ancestral King blood. The Empress and the others also needed to use it, and he would not be complaining no matter how much he had. The elder tried to persuade him further, but Ling Han had completely no intention of changing his mind. However, he did leave some room for negotiation. If this deal was successfully and smoothly completed, who knew? He could have a second portion of Ancestral King blood to be auctioned off here. After everything was settled, Ling Han was invited to a private room. Though a deal of 100,000 starstones was indeed not much for the auction house, it could not be helped, as what Ling Han had offered was much too valuable. Thus, he was also given the VIP treatment. The inside of the auction building used regulations of space, and was another world entirely. Its structure was no different than that of any other auction building, but its size was over 100 times that of an ordinary auction building, and it could accommodate millions of people. Ling Han sat in a private room, and his visibility was extremely good, showing the high regard that the auction house had for him. Not too long later, the auction officially began. Wally regained human form, and sat beside Ling Han. He had just awakened intelligence, and was in the state of swift learning. However, what he previously learned was the knowledge of a high-level dimension, while now he was learning how to be human. He was entranced. According to him, he could start a certain mode, so he could simultaneously capture the voices and expressions of everyone in the area, and then analyze and calculate for his learning purposes. Meanwhile, Ling Han placed his attention on the items on auction. He could not be bothered with this curious child any longer. At the beginning, the auction items were very ordinary. As Ling Han watched and listened, he couldn't help but yawn, right until a celestial medicine appeared, and only then did he become energized. Though it was not very old in age, it was still a celestial medicine, so it was still extremely valuable, and could be used in medicine and alchemy. Ling Han naturally moved. He was definitely very rich. He had the wealth of over 100 ancestral kings. Though those ancestral kings could not possibly carry all their wealth with them, just a small portion was wealth equivalent to that of an entire nation. As long as it was a celestial medicine, he did not care how old it was, or what kind of alchemical pill he could use it for. There was only one word for it. Buy, buy, buy. Seeing him spending so exorbitantly, the people below and those in other private rooms cast frequent glances at him, seemingly wanting to find out who the wealthy man in this private room was. Ling Han's mischievous heart was stirred up. With a thought, he immediately assumed Yu Yuan's appearance, and then shut off the formation in the private room. It could form a barrier that prevented the divine sense of others from penetrating. Of course, mere sight could not penetrate through, either. Instantly, his appearance was displayed in front of the masses. Yu Yuan was also extremely curious about this mysterious person. However, He did not turn around repeatedly. Instead, he only turned around for a look when others exclaimed aloud. Then, he was profoundly surprised. This person actually looked exactly like him. However, he was not too concerned either. The foreign realm was too large, and had too many people. It was no rare event that two people would look similar. How arrogant! Someone smirked coldly. He disliked seeing how Ling Han spent so exorbitantly, as if he was better than everyone else. Hee, one should never show off wealth. Does he plan to have someone rob him? Haha, I say everyone, let us not make competing bids. Later, we only have to rob this guy. Ling Han laughed, his expression very arrogant. If you want to rob me, just take a look at what kind of person you guys are yourselves, and estimate your own strength. Also, if you can't find me, just go ahead and come to 100 Battles Academy. My name is Yu Yuan. Pooh! Yu Yuan almost spat out a mouthful of blood. To say that this person was also named Yu Yuan was a coincidence, but if he was also at the 100 Battles Academy, that would be wrong. There was only one Yu Yuan in the academy, and that was he, who was previously the only monarch star there. Did he have some grudge with this guy that the latter would actually lay a trap for him? To say nothing of him, even Yuan and Qi Shuang frowned. This person had bought a great many celestial medicines in a single stroke. This astonishing wealth would naturally induce envy from others, and now he was deliberately impersonating Yu Yuan. Who knew how much trouble that could cause to their team? This guy was really too snarky, deliberately opening the barrier to expose a false identity. What he wanted was to draw the waters of calamity to another target. After Ling Han had shown enough of his arrogance, he unlocked the formation again. Wally looked on curiously. He surpassed a great scholar who knew how many times in the grasping of knowledge, but on the matter of underhanded schemes, he was completely a layman, and could not understand why Ling Han had done so. His understanding of worldly matters originated from calculation, and what had happened now was something that he could not obtain a result for no matter how hard he calculated. The auction continued, and after a whole 5 days, it finally came to the stage of the most valuable item. Everyone has waited long. The auctioneer pressed his hands down. Originally, we only had one portion of Ancestral King blood for sale, but because of some special conditions, we now have another. Everyone heard this, and all looked excited. Now, there were 2 portions of Ancestral King blood. However, the auctioneer paused. The second portion of Ancestral King blood has not been refined. Chapter 23-21 Refinement Technique. When these words fell, at least 99% of the people immediately shook their heads. Without being refined, how could it be used? If it was directly consumed, that would be equivalent to having a blow from an ancestral king directly explode inside one's body. Who could bear that? They could not even touch it physically. The aura of an ancestral king was too domineering, possessing shocking destructive power. However, the remaining less than 1% of cultivators looked moved. The competition for unrefined ancestral king blood would definitely be smaller, and the final price would be far from comparable to that of refined ancestral king blood. To obtain a practically equivalent treasure with a lower price would naturally spell a great profit. They had a grasp of the refinement technique of ancestral king blood. We get it, get started, someone urged. That's right. Get a move on. The auctioneer did not keep them hanging, but rather said, however, the owner of this portion of ancestral king blood does not want to auction it off for star stones. Instead, he would like to trade for the refinement technique of ancestral king blood. A great many people exchanged looks. There was actually someone that wanted to use ancestral king blood to trade for its refinement technique? Hiss, unless he still had a large amount of ancestral king blood, who would do such an idiotic thing? However, ancestral kings were practically invincible in this world. Who would be able to keep an ancestral king in captivity for blood extraction? Everyone thought this was a strange thing, and felt an indescribable curiosity, wanting to grab the seller and interrogate him. Some people had set their eyes on the auction house instead. They only had to exert some pressure, and the auction house would definitely hand over the seller. By then, it could not be helped. This deduction was too astonishing. Actually trading ancestral king blood for its refinement technique. If it was not that he had an overwhelming amount of ancestral king blood, who would believe it? Yet Ling Han did not care what the masses were thinking. In any case, he had used his disguised persona to make the deal, and had utter confidence in the heaven-deceiving technique. Furthermore, there would definitely be no ancestral kings among those that had come to participate in the auction. Would an ancestral king still need ancestral king blood? That was right. There were still differences in quality among ancestral kings, but in essence, they were extremely similar. Consuming the blood of another ancestral king would have practically zero benefit. Otherwise, the level of ancestral kings would have long descended into chaos. Immediately, a great many people communicated in secret with the auctioneer, wanting to use their own refinement technique to trade for the ancestral king blood, and the auction house presented the effects of the various refinement techniques to Ling Han so that he could study them and make his choice. Actually, this kind of secret technique was not overly precious, because there was practically no opportunity to refine an ancestral king's blood. Whether they had it or not would have completely no effects on the destiny of a clan or force. Hence, there were many people willing to make the trade. In the eyes of others, the value of a portion of ancestral king blood was much higher. Ling Han looked at the introduction of various refinement techniques. They all had obvious pros and cons. For example, a method with a higher conversion rate would need even more celestial medicines, and after conversion, the cost was actually not low at all, while for a method with lower expenses, the conversion rate was pitifully low. After a portion of ancestral king blood was refined, only 1/3 of the original amount would remain. Ling Han thought for a while, and then decided to choose the technique with a higher conversion rate. He was more willing to sacrifice more celestial medicines. In any case, he had the wealth. Once he made his choice, that bottle of ancestral king blood fell into the hands of an elite. That person grabbed the bottle and said smilingly, "Mr. Seller, if you have more ancestral king blood, you can send me a message. I am staying in the western sector of this town, Royal Horse Inn. I will wait 3 days for you." He did not know who the seller was, so these words were not directed at anyone specific. He was merely talking into empty air. Ling Han acted as if he had not heard. He had already obtained the refinement technique for ancestral king blood, so how could he possibly still be handing over any more ancestral king blood to anyone else? "Let me see," Wally said suddenly. Ling Han handed over the jade piece to him. The refinement technique was stored inside. He had already memorized it, and even if Wally did not return the memory crystal to him, he would not be worried, either. Wally took it, and placed it on his forehead. A while later he said, "According to my deductions, this technique can be further improved, boosting the conversion rate to 97%. Additionally, the ingredients expended could also be decreased by 1/3. Ling Han couldn't help but feel overjoyed. He did not suspect that Wally was lying at all. This guy had not learnt this skill at all. "Then, go ahead and get started." Wally nodded and said, "I need 56 hours 39 minutes and 11 seconds. After saying this, he closed his eyes. Flashes of light flickered on his body. He had entered calculation mode. Ling Han waited patiently. Next it would be that refined portion of ancestral king blood. At first, he had wanted to purchase it, but when he thought of the overwhelming amount of ancestral king blood he already had, it was truly unwise to compete with these people. It was possible that the price would shoot up 10 times or even higher. Then what was the point? He did indeed have a lot of money, but it was not so much that he could spend it wastefully. The competition was intense beyond expectations. Ancestral king blood was really too rare. It was practically equivalent to a celestial king tier great herb, and its effects were naturally extremely outstanding as well. Thus, this kind of intensity seemed to be logical as well. Wu Ya, Sun Feng, Yu Yuan, and the others were all placing bids loudly, as if what they were bidding were not star stones, but completely ordinary rocks that had no value. But there were a great many people that were even more frenzied than them. Very soon, the group had no choice but to withdraw from the competition dejectedly. "Let us put our money together, and then discuss afterwards how we are to split the ancestral king blood among us," Yu Yuan immediately said. They began to put their money together, but they had only made 3 bids, and their wealth was already insufficient. At this time, they could no longer be concerned about the strife between the angel and demon race, and gathered all their money together. In fact, even Yuan and Qi Shuang took out all their wealth. But it was still insufficient. By now, everyone had gone crazy. Yu Yuan gritted his teeth, and suddenly took out a celestial medicine, and said, "Add this in as well." This was a small herb that was only half a foot tall. It was completely jade green in color, as if it was forged from jade itself. Upon a closer look, there were veined patterns on the leaves, but the exact details could not be distinguished at all. Ninth Lotus Level Celestial Medicine. Qi Shuang immediately exclaimed. Jade Dragon Herb, right? Yu Yuan nodded. This is what the clan has given me to use when I break through to Ninth Lotus. But breaking through to Ninth Lotus is only a small matter for me. Instead, it is the 11th leaf that is the true difficulty. If it were not for the sake of breaking through to 11th leaf, he would have broken through to Ninth Lotus long ago. That was because he could take this step at any time from the peak stage of the 5th leaf onwards. However, he had great ambitions, and naturally could not be satisfied with mere 6th leaf, 7th leaf and the like. Instead, he was determined to attain the 11th leaf. A 9th Lotus level celestial medicine was naturally valuable, and after negotiation, the seller also agreed to his offer of using the Jade Dragon Herb to cover part of the price. After paying such a great price, this portion of Ancestral King blood finally fell into the hands of Yu Yuan and his group. It was not just him alone, but also included Qi Shuang, Yuan, Sun Feng and the others. All of them had shared the costs. This was the final auction item, and now that it had been auctioned off, the auction naturally ended. However, a great many people were smirking coldly. They would not give up the matter so easily. Instead, they had still set their eyes on the seller of the first portion of Ancestral King blood. They now were going to exert pressure on the auction house so that the latter would reveal the personal information of the seller. Ling Han chuckled, and had Wally turned back into a hanging ornament, which he hung on his own robes. Then, he simply strode outside. He had already taken the form of the demon race. Who would be able to make a connection between him and that member of the angel race previously? You're tuning in to the Xueqi's Martial Arts Saga YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.